Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. That's David Jaffe, story game designer.
Darling fools who have... Is disclosure happening today? When are we going to know about the aliens, Colin? That's what
I don't know. Are you? Yeah, it's so exciting, isn't it? So I was talking to my dad about it this weekend, actually. Happy Father's Day, by the way, belated.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hey, what did you do? Did you have fun?
We're doing it tonight. I was editing yesterday.
Oh, okay, cool. That's
so
great.
They called and they said, "Are we doing it tonight?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I think we're going to go. We're going to walk down the street. I love that we're in walking distance to a bookstore. We're going to walk to a bookstore that we like. We're going to get ice cream, and then we're going to come back here, and I'm going to show the family Minority Report.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because I rarely get to show my movies.
Right.
I always have to agree. And then on Father's Day and birthdays, it's like whatever you want. So we're going to do Minority Report.
Cool. Are you like a reluctant celebrator of these holidays, or are you like into it?
No, I mean, I'm not into it. I mean, I you know, it is. I like to celebrate other people's shit. Birthdays mean nothing. I don't know if you've reached that age yet.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. I hate my birthday, actually. I hate it.
I don't hate it. It's nice, but it's, it beats the alternative, right? To not having a birthday because then you're dead. But what I would say is the birthdays mean nothing. It's fine. I mean, look, I wrote to my kid last night. She's in Vegas, and I said, there's nothing better I've ever done than be a dad. It is the joy of my life. And I'm not one of these, I'm an honest broker, as they say. I wouldn't be hyperbolic just to be hyperbolic when it comes to things. I genuinely, it is the best part of my life so far. Not because every moment is brilliant, not because it's easy or anything like that. It's just it's purely selfish. They're just fun. It's like a little theme park with legs running around, from the age when they were born to where they are now at 18 and 20. They're just fun little people to hang out with, and I just dig it so fucking much. So I love that aspect, I guess, of it, in that it's like, oh yeah, I'm a dad, but it's to totally butcher the line in Field of Dreams where he says, I would have played for food money. Not that I get paid to be a parent, but it's like, I let's put it this way. I would have regretted not doing it. But there was a moment I didn't think it was going to happen for me. I remember once I was walking around Luxor and I was with my wife at the time, but we had just kind of figured, okay, we're not doing it, and it wasn't so much that I was mad about that. I was like, no, I didn't feel the need really. I'm like, I could take it or leave it. And I saw a family walking around Luxor. It was around Christmas time. And I would just suddenly got hit with this sense of, oh no, that would be awesome. And then a couple months later, we were in Japan and my wife at the time saw a bunch of little Japanese kids. And she said, I want to have kids now. I said, well, what changed? And she said, I'm so used to seeing bratty American kids, and the kids in Japan are so well behaved that I didn't know that was a possibility. So let's get to the baby making. And so we made the babies. It was awesome. It's good stuff.
Yeah, you had sex. Congratulations. That's what I keep saying to Dustin when he's like, he's having a kid next in July. And I'm like, we get it, Dustin. You had sex. We get it.
Oh, that's how it works?
Yeah, well, apparently.
Oh, she said she had to go away for the weekend and she would just take care of it. And she came back and she was pregnant. I just assumed it was a stork or something.
Right.
Yeah, she's fucked a stork, right?
Yeah,
what happens?
A turkey baster.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah,
anyway.
So, well, that's great. I wasn't able to see my dad yesterday, but I saw him last week and I talked to him yesterday. And
you guys chatted about the disclosure?
Yeah, well, I was just asking him if he was all caught up on it, and he's really not. Like, he knew... He's a news consumer, but it's just not breaking through for some reason. And we were talking specifically about, it seems so 4D chess that it would be fake and that it's not working. Basically, like, people are so nonplussed by it that it's not working.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that. I actually do believe it's real. And
I believe something's real about it. I don't know the thing that they've succeeded at. If their goal was to throw enough confusion at it so nobody really knows what to think, I think mission accomplished. Because the fact that people are nonplussed, and I was talking to people about this yesterday. And you and I have talked about this. The fact that you've got what's the guy's name in the South, congressman who is Republican congressman,
Matt Gaetz?
No. He's an older guy, Burchard or something, North Carolina, Tennessee, whatever. He's kind of a big vocal guy. He might be leading one of the committees.
Oh, okay. I'll look him up.
And the fact that he and one of his colleagues, who I think is a Democrat, are on camera being interviewed, and they are, this is not, Jonathan Frakes on his Unexplained Crazy Things TV series. This is a fucking Republican senator, congressman who, is not out there espousing crazy shit, literally talking about interdimensional beings. And when the reporter says aliens, he says, we're not talking about aliens. Grouch never said, listen to the words. He never says aliens. He says interdimensional beings. And what he is saying is beginning to sort of become very, very, very believable based on the stuff that we're gathering to prove out what he said in the hearing. And I'm like, the fact that occurred, and that has not been front page news on the day it occurred, let alone every single fucking day afterwards, that interdimensional beings, that's some Star Trek shit. And it's coming out of, what the fuck is going on? So I don't know why people haven't vibed with it, but yeah, it could very well be. That's the thing, right? They're calling it slow disclosure. They're slowly rolling this shit out. There was the Harvard paper the other day that came out just to get people comfortable. But I think most people are like, dude, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck.
It's not until they, to me, I feel like it's going in circles in some sense. Like I've not tuned out, but I'm just like, all right, I believe I have a working theory of what I think is going on. And
what is it?
I think so. First, it would seem obvious that it was aliens, except for the fact that, if you believe in like the rare Earth hypothesis or just space and time being so insurmountable, there are really smart people that are like, interstellar travel is just not going to be a thing unless you break down physics to the point where we just simply don't know how to do it. It would take us it was something crazy, like thousands of years to get to Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star at our current technology. It just wouldn't work. That wouldn't even be a practical generation ship. But when the internet, so Tucker Carlson and other people have been saying this weird shit too, where they've been talking to people and they're like, it's some sort of spiritual or interdimensional thing. And then I'm like, okay, so that makes a little more sense. Actually, it's actually more believable that they're probably so my working theory is that these are humans from the future.
Right. It's either humans from the future or fourth dimensional beings that are human-like, that are able to somehow, it's kind of like Flat World, right? It's our version of Flat World of seeing them coming into our dimension. So whether they're coming back in time or whether they're simply living side by side with us and we just can't perceive them because we can't see in the fourth dimension or whatever dimension they're in, that's very probable. Certainly more than, like you said. And it does, I'm a layperson on this, so I'm sure there are people out there. I know there are people out there way smarter than me in a lot of ways, certainly when it comes to like astrophysics and physics in general. But it does kind of track to my layman's mind about the way these things move. Because if you think about moving through space and time interdimensionally, then something like it did a 90-degree angle at Mach 5. And there was no sense of propulsion. Yeah, because it's not really moving physically. It's changing its position in the fourth dimension.
Right. They call it.
So
there's a theory for that, right? Like it's called the Abuer drive or something like that. Like the idea of
I don't know, but it makes sense.
Yeah, it's like the idea of collapsing space in front of you and putting it behind you.
Right. That's right.
And that might be a way to travel really fast, like really interdimensionally, obviously, but intergalactically, or not intergalactically, interstellarly. Yeah. Or
it could just be that we've made some really cool tech and we're putting up all these smoke screens because God forbid China gets it.
Yeah, it's interesting, dude. It's like anything could be possible, including none of this being real and it being another fucking.
It's probably Sweet Baby.
It's sweet baby. And it's the
Sweet
DEI
in the UFOs.
Right. It's a DEI pilot. And so it could be nothing. It could be us or an adversary. It seems clear that the technologies don't make any, like, we have no grasp on even what's happening. It seems like gravity manipulation. And they were saying, like, some of the pilots, like Ryan Graves was saying, I think that, like, the way that it would be, you'd be like a splatter in the cockpit, the way these things move, you know,
if you're in a fucking, you know, the most industrial harness in the world, you're going Mach 4 and it goes like this and then goes like this. You're just like, you are just liquefied instantly.
Yeah. And we have drones and stuff that go like Mach 15 or something like that, but like nothing, they can't even stay stable. I was watching something about that, like that they've kind of abandoned this idea of like hypersonic drones because they're so unstable because they can't move. They're going so fast that if you just want to turn it 1 degree, it just like fucking sputters out into nothing because it's going so fast. Yeah. So anyway, it is interesting. But what I was saying is that I feel like everyone's going in circles with it, just in the sense I've kind of tuned out mostly where I'm like, enough. Now it's time for proof. Like and I'm not saying you have to show us a whole craft or an alien body or something, but there's got to be like, you have to show people proof. Enough of the talk. You know?
Again, that's assuming there's an agenda and you know that they are rolling out some kind of disclosure. But there's also the possibility of what you see is what you get, and they're like, dude, yeah, we agree enough. Is what we got. We're sharing it within our ability without messing with national defense. You know, I mean, it could be that too. It could just be that they don't have anything other than what they have that they've shared, and it's like, we don't know. You know, what's interesting about it though, with the China thing is I'm trying to remember where I heard this, and it makes a lot of sense, but I had never put 2 and 2 together before, or sorry, 1 and 1 together, which is 3, I think, according to Iron Man or Rhodey, whatever the guy's name is. What's the guy's name? Terrence Howard, or who's the guy?
In War Machine.
Yeah, who plays War Machine in the first Iron Man?
Yeah, he's the one that's replaced, right? Is it Terrence Howard that's the one that's replaced? And then he's replaced by
Don Cheadle.
Don Cheadle, right?
But anyway.
That's like only, I can't believe people should be impressed out there. I got a Marvel question. I knew it.
There you go. Well, and it's so fucking weird too. I don't even get it's different. So I'll come back to it maybe. But the weird thing about it though is that, it was like people were talking about AI, and the reason America is not pumping the brakes on racing towards, I guess, general intelligence, which is sort of the super intelligence, because they're like, we can do all that. But if we do that, China ain't going to do that. Russia's not going to do that. And do you really want to have an adversary out there that has AI that makes Chat GPT 4.0 or whatever the government has, which is probably 20 times already better than that, look like a toddler compared to a fucking Einstein, So I get it. And it's just, but the weird thing about all this is it really, every day I wake up going, we're living in a fucking scripted simulation.
It feels more and more like it, doesn't it?
Because it's like it's like this is the stuff of movies at this point. It's like aliens, interdimensional beings, super intelligent AI. It's almost like we're getting into the third act, boys. We gotta ramp it up because it's sweeps week or so. I don't fucking understand how this is real life. Like, have I died and I'm living like because this is much more exciting and interesting than normal life has been up until 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's strange.
Well, just because I think the reality is that unless it's like a super weapon that we've created, which again, I don't believe, or it's fake, the answer is crazy. And that to me is exciting.
Whatever the answer is.
If it's an alien from Beetlejuice or some random close by star, or if it's like
interdimensional,
if it's interdimensional beings or humans from the future that got trapped here or something, like whatever it is, it's fucking crazy. I mean, that's like what's exciting.
Or if it's literal tech that we have invented that allows you to travel in a way that will absolutely revolutionize the world. I mean, even if it's pure terrestrial, it's third dimensional tech that allows you to go from this space to that space in the blink of an eye. Can you imagine how much that will change everything.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I'm in, man. I'm a fucking fan. And then you got Caitlin Clark. I mean, Jesus, 3-pointers all the goddamn day.
Yeah, she's good, huh?
She's really good. And there's something, I was telling your brother, we were talking on Constellation. There's nothing in, now I say this as a guy who looks like I do. I'm not sitting here look shaming anybody, but there's nothing, typically attractive about her, but there's something sexy about her too. I don't know if it's the 3-pointers. I don't know what it is, but it's just, I like her. I like her, and I like the WNBA now. And I started, by the way, watching total random. My Ritalin just kicking in, but I started watching 30 for 30 is what you recommended, the ESPN show. That's
awesome.
And I just started it though, because I'd just been busy with other things. And I started with the one that was I don't even know the names because I didn't follow basketball back then, but it's the guy, he was playing the Knicks that Pat Riley was coaching, and he's the guy that trash talked and in the 90s.
Was it Christian Laettner?
No.
Isaiah Thomas. I'm trying to think of people that they made 30 for 30.
It was like he got a headbutt, but it didn't do anything, but he acted like he was like going to the hospital and shit. It was just like, it is so fucking funny to watch him and his adversary just pick on each other. It feels like video game trash talk, and I'm just laughing the whole fucking. It's Daniel Close, I think, or Cloves is the director of it. It's the Knicks versus the Pacers.
Is it the Knicks Pacers? And
yes.
Is it Starks?
Starks is the guy on the New York
Reggie
team.
Miller.
Reggie Miller is who it was. I was peripherally aware of Reggie Miller because Nike commercials, but I didn't really know anything about him. And then I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, that guy's hilarious. He is such a fucking dick. It's a good show, man. I'm digging that series.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, when documentaries are well made, in my experience, I'll watch a documentary about literally anything. So it doesn't matter what the topic is. In fact, the more esoteric and weird the topic, the better.
If you can vibe, you're like, oh, that's really interesting. I agree.
Yeah, like just one of my favorite documentaries is King Corn, which is old now, but all about like the corn manufacturing in the United States. And it's fucking awesome. That,
yeah,
you know,
it is. There was a wake up moment I had with documentaries, probably about 15 years ago, because I'm a very progressive liberal guy, and so it started with Michael Moore, and I like Michael Moore. I like what he's talking about, but there became this point where it was just so preaching to the choir that it no longer felt, and it's on the right too. Who's that guy, the D'Souza guy who makes all these documentaries? It's like, what's the point? It's like, it's like being in Cleveland in a concert and saying, "We love you, Cleveland." Yeah. It's like, how hard is that? So, I've so many of the documentaries that get funded today are the ones that basically, play to the preach the choir, basically. And I'm like, that doesn't do it for me. I want something interesting that I don't know about. I don't need to be told that my views are, then I get sent out of the theater on a big fucking, look at me. I agree with that movie, and fuck you,
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that, the streaming era especially has been really great for.
Oh my God, Amazon
stories.
They'll just be like, "Hey, you want to make a documentary? Here's $50K." I saw a documentary recently about a guy who opened an arcade, a retro. It's like an actual arcade with machines, and he's also a punk rock singer. And it's just like in how they had to close it because they couldn't make any money. And I'm like, there's nobody would fund this in the past. But they're like, yeah, fuck it. Here's some money, and it's good. Yeah, it's just it's not anything. I love it.
The documentaries are, like you said, so cheap too, and good filler for, typically so cheap, All right, so let's talk about some other. Oh, by the way, I wanted to compliment your D&D shirt. That's very nostalgic. I love that era.
It's not mine. I stole it from my girlfriend's boyfriend. But that said, thank you. Oh, she wore it home. She left it here when she went back to see him, and I'm like, well, I'm fucking going to wash that motherfucking thing and wear it. Wow,
that's interesting. Thank you. That's intense. That's an intense
It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean like, I'm like, fuck you. I like the guy. He's a nice guy. I'm just saying he's got good taste in shirts.
Wait, so tell me about this situation. Tell me more about it.
The boyfriend?
Yeah.
Just some guy. And it was really weird because she met him online on Discord, which I get is becoming not even becoming, is the norm for a certain generation, especially that we're in their main teen years during COVID. I mean, Discord really kept them social. And so at first, but I'm a kid of the 80s. So I'm like, well, what do you mean you're going to go meet him? You haven't even met him before,
Right.
So we were obviously very, I literally was like, when she went out to visit him, I was literally looking up like security apparatuses, like people I could hire to say, look, I just want you to go park in front of the house. I don't care. As long as she's not in any danger, there's no sex trafficking. I don't fucking know, So we were, and I had a top down view Google of his place, and he agreed to share his. I mean, I was just like, look, it's not that I have a problem with my kid going out and having adventures. I want to make sure that, there's an eye in the sky and she's safe. But once, we began to trust the guy and know the guy, it's been great. I mean, I think I've never understood, like I saw Cliff Bleszinski post for Father's Day yesterday, a picture of him meeting his wife's dad for the first time. And it was a joke. It wasn't like a serious thing, but it was the trope of the dad with the shotgun. Like the dad had and I'm just like, I'll bring out the shotgun if you treat my kids poorly. But if you want to date my kids and have adventures with my kids and contribute to their joy and they contribute to your joy, I've never understood why parents seem to be so reticent for that. Isn't that what you want for your kids, to grow up and have a happy, fun life? But
yeah, I agree. It's funny, man. It is interesting how much things have changed, because I'm 39 and I was on the internet starting in the mid 90s. And I made some good friends, including a good friend of mine, Graham, who I haven't spoken to in many, many years, but we were boys for years, and we met online and only knew each other online and would occasionally talk on the phone from like 1996 or 97 to 2000. And we actually met each other. You might remember in PlayStation Magazine, PSM, there were like, you could put like ads and personal stuff in the back and you could send them in. So it's funny, if people go back and look at old PSM magazines, there was like 3 ways to do it. There was a page where you could like buy and sell shit. There were these things where you would, on the back of like the last 10 pages, there would be these bars and it would just have people's names and like what they wanted to play. And they were looking for pen pals and all that kind of shit. It was really cool. And like a very primitive 1.0 thing, web 1.0 thing. And so in 2000, my mom and dad got divorced in the early 90s. My mom lived in Boston and I used to spend a lot of time up there with her when I was off from school on the island. And so Graham came and visited us in 2000 for a week, and it was really awesome. We had a great time, but it was very unusual and novel to everyone in our lives. It's like, wait, at that time, it's like, you don't know this person. This person could be a murderer. And it's like, no, like we talk on AIM and ICQ and IRC every day. Like I know him better than I know anyone. And we were fast friends. And now we fast forward to almost 25 years and people are like fucking each other after talking to each other for 5 minutes on Tinder. And I think to each their own, but it's just so funny how that's changed completely.
Absolutely. And I think it's good. And like I said, I mean, I saw firsthand, I don't want to be dramatic about it. We're not going to know what the long-term ramifications of COVID were on sort of the kids who weren't able to be social the way they're used to for 2.5 years or whatever. Because at least in California, it was a long stretch and then they went back to school, but then we could pull them back because there was another flare up or whatever. But, these kids were homebound for a meaningful amount of time that they should have been out dating and having stupid adventures. And, and so thank God that Discord was there. I mean, it's amazing just how integral it is into their lives now. So yeah, I think it's cool, man. It's been fun to watch all these changes and stuff. I love it. Yeah.
I should figure out a way to reach out to that guy, Graham. I haven't spoken to him in so long. I think we had a falling out of some sort, and I don't even remember what it is. Like I'm not even being facetious. I literally don't even really remember why we stopped talking. Almost
maybe
20 years ago.
Was Graham.
Yeah, Graham. Yeah, that was his. He was a sweet kid.
Last name was Cracker.
Cracker.
Fellas.
But D&D, you never played D&D, or were you a D&D person?
Oh, well, okay. It's funny you mentioned that because I was going to call you about this for something totally different related to D&D. But so D&D, I was hook, line, and sinker into the world of it. But I was in Alabama, not to say people in Alabama can't play D&D, but at the time I didn't know anybody who played it. So my brother had bought, for some reason, the advanced D&D set. I just poured over it because the art was so evocative. And then I would go into the bookstore and see all the modules and shit like that. And I would buy, I watched the cartoon. I would buy some of the games were like a handheld D&D game and stuff. I was so into swords and sorcery and all that shit, but I never really could get a group of people together to play it. So my first official D&D session was about a year and a half ago that I did online, where we hired, I know it sounds goofy to say a professional dungeon master, but that's what they are. I hired a guy and I had a bunch of people from the stream come on and play, and it was really cool. It was really fucking fun. And I've been thinking about doing another one. That's what I was going to call you, of like getting some people together, that, people are like, oh, that's a game guy, whether it's, Colin or Ken Levine or, 4 or 5 people and have just a single session campaign that we would hire somebody to run for.
That'd be fun. I would do that.
Yeah. But I missed the boat when it was first really big, when it was first coming out. And what I think is cool about it now and is how it's really become doable online. And Wizards of the Coast has been talking about, and they've kind of put out a couple of little teasers for their digital online D&D. And I don't mean like a game like, oh, we've hired, a game developer, but they're making a set of tools that are much more robust than what's out there, so you can actually play online. And I am very excited for that. And I was playing this demo the other day called Tiny Glade on Steam Next Fest. And what it is basically a kind of almost like a commercialized version of what certain game developers already have as proprietary tools, where you're able to go into an environment and raise walls and geometry and geography, actually add steps and window. It just makes building this little fantasy environment instant. And it's just, and you can go down into first person and fly the camera and stuff. And I'm just like, my God, to have a dungeon master have something like this, and you're all playing online, and it's like you go into this room and suddenly, he's pre-baked some of it because he prepped his mission, but also some of it's like, oh, the user says, I want to blow a hole in that wall. And he's just like, and there's a hole in the wall. And now, the adventure continues. I mean, I think I'm heading into an era where probably in 5 years, if you ask me that question about D&D, the answer would be, oh yeah, I play all the time. I have a campaign I've been playing for a while. I missed it when it launched. I knew what it was. I loved it. Circumstances weren't right, but I think it's the neatest fucking thing out there.
Yeah, I still have my I was pulling it out of my drawer, my original, still my dice bag from
oh my goodness,
when I was a child with all my different colored dice in it.
When is the last time you played?
Late aughts. I had a game. So I lived with these. I've told you in the past, like the house of gay guys that I lived in San Francisco. They were all major. I was the only straight guy in there. They were all huge nerds.
Okay.
And like the guy James that I was really friendly with for several years when he lived there. He had every episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation on VHS.
Oh wow.
And had them like lining his room. They were funny. They were really great guys, and they were really into D&D, and so I played with them for a few years actually.
Is D&D different playing with gay guys? Like, is it like what they want to do is very different?
I think I remember it being like how like macho and straight it all was actually, right. Like, which was funny, which was cool. I mean, it's interesting because I really did enjoy it. And it was like very community, like we would order pizza and have a good time, smoke weed and drink. And it really is just about finding people that you have good buy-in with. Because you said Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. That's when I got into it too. Like the shirt you're wearing is original D&D, which I think they've brought back like that look. But that's very nostalgic to me because that was the shit like the older kids had that I didn't have. Like with that logo and that version 1 and AD&D V2 was the one that we were really into. And you're right, like just poring over the books and stuff. And dude, I had a very nostalgic, it's hard to almost describe, like moment. I was going through all my D&D stuff, putting it in the attic. I'll never see it again probably. And from back in the day, and I was finding like all these things that had imprints on them. So like I used to play with my friend Eric when I was a kid, and he would draw maps like this very specific way, not like really ornate, but like you walk into a pub, here's the table, the dots are the people, here's and imprinted into a lot of the stuff where it was his like his drawing style and his handwriting. And I was like, that's, like when you draw on top of something and then it stays there forever, like a box. And I was like, wow, that's so like none of the documents are there. It's just, that's the way he did draw. And I was like, oh, that's so nostalgic. It was really wonderful. It's a great game, and it was cool to see it kind of come back, I think, a little bit due not only to the online stuff, which is totally foreign to me, but also
Stranger Things and
yeah.
Critical Role. Mm-hmm. Critical Role is amazing because I mean, I don't watch it, but I generate like some of my kids' friends watch it, and they're really fucking into that thing, which is basically just some internet celebrities playing a bunch of fucking D&D. And it's more than that now. It's become a big fucking thing. It launched with I think it launched with Felicia Day's one of her channels, but then it kind of broke off and became its own thing. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting back into it. And when I played about a year ago, the wow moment for me, and I guess this is just like, yeah, Jaffe, that's what a good dungeon master does, but was, I'm a very outside the box thinker, not because I'm proud of that, just how my mind works. I don't, I'm just like, oh, well, what if we tried this? And we did something like we blasted a hole in the floor of this tavern. I think it was because there was this evil force outside that we couldn't get by the windows, because if we got by the windows, whatever it was emanating out of itself and radiating would come in and kill us. And we were trying to figure out how to get out of the tavern. And somehow we realized, let's blow a hole in the floor. And there was a whole little adventure down there that he had planned for that could have never been dealt with if we have gotten out of the tavern a totally different way. And it really, again, my whole fantasy is the holodeck. I just want to live in these worlds. It felt like, holy shit, this is happening. It was cool, man.
It is cool.
So yeah, I'll hit you up on the next one. And it should be fun.
I'll definitely
let me know if there's anybody you think could be a good member.
Yeah, Ken would be a good member. I wonder if you'd be interested.
I gotta commit to him that I won't ask him any questions about his work.
Yeah, you can't spring anything on him.
No, I'll just be, and I will, I'll just say like, look, it's just the D&D shit, and I'll record it maybe or whatever, so you can approve it before we go live.
Yeah,
because I know he's real nervous about it. And I get it.
He is, because he's much more open than people in his position usually are, but it comes with a caveat of like needing to be careful, both conversations we've done on Sacred Plus, we cut out big pieces of it, both of them, because especially the first one, because you were talking way too deeply about Judas, and I had known about the game long before it was announced. So I was kind of eager to speak about it to him, like personally, publicly, but anyway,
right.
Let's talk about games, since that's what most people want to hear us talk about, although I talk about aliens all day personally. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's start here. How are you feeling about the Summer Games Fest and post Summer Games Fest? What are your reflections on Jeff Keighley and his show and the Xbox showcase and Ubisoft and everyone else? Did anything stick out to you?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm trying. It's all a big blur now because it all blends together. I'm trying to extrapolate or extract what Summer Game Fest was, specifically what they showed. So Summer Game Fest, I think, was mostly disappointing, but only in the sense that there was an expectation that Keighley had tried to try to tamp it down and say, look, and I get it. I mean, the days of those big release after big release after big release announced, those are probably gone or mostly gone, just because the time it takes to make things and the cost it takes. And so I think there's still that nostalgia expectation that it's going to be a while before that runs its course. And so it's going up against that. But in terms of what they showed, I would have to go back and look at a list. The Xbox show I was very impressed by. And the Ubisoft show, until I started reading people's experiences playing Star Wars, I was very impressed by. I'm still excited for Assassin's Creed Shadows, but the summer, what were some of the Summer Game Fests? Was there?
I don't even remember. I'll look it up.
Yeah, I mean, let me usually like all the sites are like, here's everything revealed at the Summer Game Fest.
I'm everything announced at the Summer Games Fest. This is Games Radar. Oh, so Lego Horizon.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
I will say on that, I mean, first off, I don't like Horizon at all. I think it's a terrible franchise. I think Aloy, whatever, is a horrible character.
God,
but
people hate Horizon. It's so funny to me. I don't get it.
You know what it is? I mean, I can't articulate it that well, but it's got something to do with the character. I think she's just she doesn't have any juice. She's just so boring and meh. You know, she's like this kind of I can't stand her.
She's a catalyst for the world, in my opinion. Like, it's definitely not about Aloy. Like, what's interesting?
I'm thrilled she's a catalyst for the world. She's still boring as fuck. But all that said, though, I think in the Lego game, I was like, oh, I like the vibe of it. And I saw a lot of people writing about it saying it's really cool to see this more light vibe applied to Horizon because, and again, I'm not an expert on the franchise, so I can't speak to this, but I was surprised to see them say this is what the franchise needs. Not so much a Lego game, but a lift in its sense of how it presents to the world, because it seems so somber. But I love the gameplay of Horizon's amazing. I mean, the control is great, the combat's great, the dinosaurs are great. I just find the IP disturbing. So anyway, point is though, I'm not a big Lego guy, but I think it looks good. What fascinated me about it really was between Horizon Lego and Astro, which I guess was Sony's State of Play, wasn't Game Fest. I'm real interested in that because other than Crash and Spyro back in the day on PS1, Sony has put out some really great family games, but or all ages games, and they never really connect. And as recently as like Sackboy's Big Adventure, which I thought was excellent, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which I thought was frankly my favorite Ratchet they've ever made. Just so well done. And so at first my response was, oh, here we are again. Why the fuck are they doing this? I don't know. We're going to be right back into the Insomniac leaks where the least successful game they've put out was Ratchet and Clank, even though it was one of their best games. But then I was talking about it on my stream and I had this thought. It's like, maybe now it will work, because maybe now if you look generationally, you've got a lot of people who are having kids who are in their late 20s and 30s. And maybe now, because the PlayStation brand to them is so near and dear to their heart, that they're going to have a PS5 and they are going to be sharing this stuff with their kids. So maybe it's just been a matter of needing that time. Because short of that, and maybe that's valid. Maybe marketing's like, look, we get it, but now we've been in the game long enough that the dads and moms are now actually, they've come up with Ratchet, they've come up with PlayStation. They will actually say, hey kids, look at Astrobot. Let's play it as a family. Other than that, I can't figure out why they would do it, because they never do well. Puppeteer was one of the coolest fucking games, which was by the guys who made Astrobot, or the director, I believe. And nobody bought it. Nobody talks about it, but it was so imaginative and so interesting. And so I don't know. So, but anyway, so one of my takeaways was I don't quite think I understand why Sony continues to double down on these family all ages games when you see the sales, but both of them look good. Astrobot looks good. Maybe this is the time when the generation arrives to actually make them work. I mean, do you agree that it's weird that they're doing this family thing when they're both their games, except Black Myth, which is sort of a timed exclusive now, right?
Not even. It wasn't even supposed to be. It's not like they acquired it,
Right.
They just can't get their Xbox Series S version going, I guess.
But their Christmas games are basically family games, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think part of the problem here is that there's a gap of games that were supposed to come out that have been canceled.
The service stuff?
Well, yeah, like The Last of Us Online obviously was supposed to probably fill a huge gap. Who knows where Twisted Metal was in development? It went through two different developers. And stuff that wasn't even announced or acknowledged. Because what's funny about PS5 this year, in my opinion, is that it's actually really strong. Like the amount of games on it are really strong. It's just that Sony didn't really make many of them, or really almost any of them, except for probably closest in delineation to like Helldivers 2 and Second Party or whatever. But you have your Final Fantasy games and so on and so forth, and Stellar Blade and all the rest.
Stellar Blade and Ronin.
Right, Rise of the Ronin, which is not next on my list, but I downloaded it, bought it because it was discounted, and I'm going to play that soon. So yeah, it is a little weird, but my thing about this is that there's so much to say about there's so many threads to pull out, because I agree with you. Japan Studio, when Japan Studio went away, people were like, whoa, man, Japan Studio. I'm like, none of you even bought any of the games. What are you talking about? What are you, crazy? None of you can even name a lot of the games that came out from that place. And I loved Tokyo Jungle, and people loved all these different games, but we tried for many years to try to open your eyes to Puppeteer. I think I might have told you this story, and I've said it before on Sacred in the past. One of the times I went to Japan Studio, two people that worked on Puppeteer pulled me aside. I was in the cafeteria, and were like, we just wanted to thank you for your support of Puppeteer on IGN, because I reviewed it and previewed it, and I really liked it, and no one bought it. And it's not my job to make you buy or not buy games. I don't really care, but I was like, wow, that's so strange that they felt like they wanted to say that to me because people are just not paying attention to their product. So my assumption is multifaceted. First of all, I think that, and it's the same thing with the handheld, that's no doubt going to happen, is Sony has looked at Nintendo and been like, why have we been seeding this space for so long? We've seeded it to such a degree with family-friendly, childlike games, accessibility, whole family, E for everyone, and the handheld mantra. We've really made a huge mistake here. And I do think that they have, especially because they're...
What do you mean? You mean they've been avoiding it because they've been in those spaces?
Yeah, but not well. Well, what I was going to say was I personally don't think they have meaningfully been in that space since probably the middle of the PS3 era. And really, they haven't successfully been in that space since the PS2 era. Because when you think about it, so you have Twisted Metal and all the games you worked on, you have Jet Moto and all that stuff coming out early, and the fighting games and all the rest. But really, it's like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. And then in the Jak and Daxter, Ratchet, Sly Cooper, and they were circulating between these games pretty well. And so my opinion on this is that they want to play in that space and they want to do it with a one or two high quality games, which I think is maybe the best approach, because it was too spread shot, like we said, with the Japan Studio games or all the weird stuff coming out of Sony Santa Monica out of XDev that was kind of more childlike or whimsical. I think here they're just like, why don't we just do one or two big things and see what happens? And I think that's. I sadly don't think Astrobot is going to sell well. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, if it's great, I hope it does sell well, but I don't blame them for trying. I think you have to have one studio in that space, and they let Media Molecule waste so much time that really these guys are their only option, and they close Pixel Opus too. So
yes. And Media Molecule, I know they're still in the game doing something. I don't know what they're doing, but, Astrobot not selling well. I mean, I don't think you're wrong, but I guess my question is how much of that has to do with the fact that, Sackboy's Big Adventure and Ratchet didn't sell well? Or are you talking about just the lack of appeal of it as a brand that's going to get people losing their shit as a family?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter, in the sense that die might be cast where it's like, you're not going to win here. Like, this is your kind of family friendly accessibility approach is you tried with Wonderbook, you tried with all in the Move and all these different things. Like, it's just not going to happen for you. But I don't mind them fighting that front, because they do have this. This is what kind of annoys me about the discourse, actually, is like they do have, and I think reasonably so, this identity in the wider gaming industry as being like sad dad simulator and very serious post-apocalyptic stuff and violence. And
I mean, they've made that bet. I mean, they've made a lot of money off that, and they've made a lot of great content off that. But I don't think it's wrong for people to think that, because I think that's what they've promoted.
Well, I totally agree, but I don't blame, especially like in mid and long term content management and your marketing and all of that. If the people are coming to the powers that be and say, like, we need to be more multidimensional than this. And that's why I think it's funny, because Horizon is a post-apocalyptic game, but it is the most differentiated franchise that they do, in my opinion, which is why I think it's so attractive. It's weird and different. Because even Death Stranding and all this stuff, it's like, oh my God, this is all, and I love it, but it's all the same, So I think that's the argument. What do you think about Lego Horizon Adventures being on Switch? To me, there's been a kind of a discourse. I'd be curious to know what you think of this. People are like, oh, the Lego must have held a gun to their head and said, like, you have to do this. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Sony could buy their way out of any deal they wanted to and make any deal they wanted with Lego. I think Sony wants to know. And about how their games might perform there. And my theory is that MLB The Show is giving them some interesting data that they want to continue to explore and see if they can kind of spread the field there a little bit.
Look, it's always in the top played Xbox top 10, or for a long time it stays in there, and then the new one comes out and replaces it. I mean, there's an emotional response a lot of people have that I imagine they're interested in talking about, but I don't give a fuck about things like that. I don't care about exclusives. I don't care. I mean, I just want games, and so I did read, and I don't know how much of it was PR and how much of it's true, that some of the Guerrilla guys saying, and I think this might be smart, where they're saying we want to expand the franchise, we want to expand the brand, and it could just well be that they know putting a game out like that on PlayStation 5 is not going to get it done near as well as also introducing a whole new generation, especially of younger people, to the brand of Horizon, and through that maybe PlayStation in general. So I think it's cool. Why not? You know, the thing that I have heard people say that I do agree with as a that's weird is why isn't it, given that the PS4 is still selling very, very well, why, you know, I get why it would be on Switch. I don't get why it would not be on PS4.
I agree completely.
It's not like the Switch is some powerhouse that, well, we couldn't make it work.
Well,
on
right.
PS4.
Because if it was PS5 and PC only, then you maybe be like, okay, that's the way they're going. But since it is on Switch, it's obviously able to run on
I mean,
PS4.
the only thing I could think of is maybe it was a scope issue and they said, look, we have to choose. And like you said, we've seen some data about MLB that even if we might make, you know, we might sell 1.5 million more copies if we put it on PS4, the data that we're going to get by putting it on Switch is ultimately going to be more valuable to us than that.
Yeah.
That could be the reason if they were limited in scope, but
Agreed.
It is interesting. You know, what I saw though, and let me just see real quick if there was what else games, because I'm trying to remember. So,
here, I have a list if you want it. I'll put it in the chat of the games at Summer Game Fest. Is that what
you have there's a chat we can look at?
Yeah, if you see, do you see it here?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, so just click that link. It's a Games Radar link. It's just a list of sequential
Okay, so
stuff.
let's see if anything jumped out. I mean, Cuff Bust looked fun. I didn't think Choo Choo Charles was a great game. I thought it had a great personality, but I didn't think it ultimately delivered, but that looked like fun. Blumhouse, I'm very excited for Blumhouse Horror because I love their philosophy of movies where they go to the creators and just say, look, as long as you stay in this budget and the idea is commercial enough, just go fucking wild. And you get some really cool stuff like that. Horror games are different in that there have been it's one of my favorite genres, but there have been so many lo-fi horror games made for sub $1 million that, you know, that sexy part of the PR message doesn't really land as much. And so what they showed, short of the names, like David Cronenberg's son is working on a game. The guy who is the lead designer on Spec Ops: The Line is working on a game for them. Short of the names and just that it's the pedigree of Blumhouse, and the head of the division is Zach Woods.
Santa Monica.
Santa Monica, who I worked with on Twisted Metal. Those things excite me, but nothing they showed made me go, oh my fucking God, these guys... Because I keep waiting for somebody to come to horror in games with a better understanding of interactive horror. And usually what we get is the wrappings of cinema horror over what is ultimately an action shooter or a stealth game or whatever. But as I've said numerous times, to me, some of the scariest games are not horror. Playing Elden Ring or Bloodborne and knowing do I go into that room and farm for more, you know, souls or whatever I'm farming for, knowing full well that I probably don't want to waste the 100,000 I'm carrying right now. That's a sense of fear. And I'm not being silly about it. I'm saying that the emotional response to that is much scarier than running away from a movie looking character in a zombie game that I've run away from 20 times because I keep missing the right turn and hitting a dead end and he kills me. And ultimately it just becomes like Dragon's Lair, you know? So I keep hoping somebody in horror is going to come to the table and say, I know how to make this work at a thematic and mechanic level, but so far nothing. But so I'm cautiously optimistic in the Blumhouse stuff. What else did they have? Let's see this list. They showed, there it is. I'm sure I'm going to miss some stuff because I'm just blazing through it real fast. Civilization 7, I'm sure will be great.
Yeah, that's exciting just because it's coming to console at the same time for the first time, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll still play it on PC just because I can't imagine playing that kind of game with a controller. I'm sure that it's good, but
and it'll probably have mouse and keyboard support too on PS5, which is cool.
Okay, that's good.
Like
that's
System
good.
Shock, you can play with a mouse and keyboard on PS5, which is pretty interesting.
Phantom Blade looked amazing as a trailer. That looked really fucking good.
I mean, there's not much. I mean, there's a huge volume of games. It's just because I agree with you. It's just, well, that's what I was going to really ask towards the end. And I guess we're kind of getting there of this part of the conversation. Is just so many of these games are going to fail no matter how good they are. There's just too many games, man. Like it.
Okay. That's I think there's two parts of this. Part of it is we're getting to a point, and I think it's really quite fascinating where, the way to market video games, if you no longer have, or if you're no longer having as much of the cinematic presentation, because cinematic presentation via movie trailers is an art form that has been perfected since, the 20s, since there were movies that were being advertised. And so it makes sense that you look at a show like Xbox, which I thought the Xbox show was fantastic, but I'm not a moron. I understand that we're looking at trailers, right? And I thought that Redfall, especially after Pete Hines went on stage the day after the last Xbox show last year, I was all in on Redfall. But then you know what happened. You play it, and I'm not one of these guys that thinks it's trash, but it was like, it's okay. Certainly didn't live up anywhere near the trailers, right? So when you are spending money and doing a lot on presentation, it's easier. When you don't have that, you really are leaving the heavy lifting to either the conceptual aspect of like a really cool idea narratively or a really cool idea mechanically. Those things tend to be much more difficult unless they are really big swings to convey outside of a demo, right? It's like I'm playing this game right now called Bloodless from 3D Realms, and it's quite good. It's a really cool demo. But if you just were to watch the trailer, you'd go, I forgot about that, right? Because it looks like a little indie game and all this stuff, but it's actually quite cool. I think that's a really interesting, important challenge as we are seeing more and more games coming out, especially from the AA and single A space. How do you communicate? Can you imagine seeing the trailer for Vampire Survivors for the first time? You wouldn't even think, you'd forget about it. It's not some stupid but it was, it was on a number of Game of the Year lists because it was a genuinely great game. How do you use marketing that is primarily relying on cinematic marketing techniques to sell that shit? So when you look at that list and say, I don't see a lot, for me, it's important to remind myself that it not showing well at a Jeff Keighley or a Sony or an Xbox show doesn't really mean anything. It's once you're actually playing it, if that's where its juice is, right? I don't know how you get around that short of demos, but even that, Steam Next Fest has hundreds of fucking demos. You're not going to play most of them. So it's a real interesting challenge, I think. The best thing I can imagine is kind of like interactive commercials. Like I think Switch is about to put out a game which is kind of like the NES 1990 Championship cart, but it's just a bunch of mini games back to back. It's like, maybe it's like, okay, hey, here's a 40-second WarioWare almost kind of version of whatever, a AA game, Wreckfest 2. Just play it for 40 seconds. And if you like it, put it on your wish list, because that's going to do a lot more than a trailer ever would. But I don't know. It's a tough conundrum. But in terms of too many games resulting in failure, fuck yeah. It's oversaturated. It's
going to be bad
at this point.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad until it's not. It's going to be like movies. The fact that almost everybody can make a game now if they just want to, and if they're willing to put in a little bit of work, not a lot of work anymore. You don't have to code or anything. Just learn a fucking simple engine. Everybody can communicate interactively now. it's going to end up basically probably being like movies, where there's so much out there that most YouTube videos go unwatched. Most big movies, the movies ain't what they used to be unless it's something really special. And I think ultimately that's going to be great. It's going to force the cream to rise to the top. And even if it's a little indie thing, people are going to discover it and talk about it. But for discoverability, for a while, it's going to be rough. I saw you guys talking about, what is it, 50,000 Hyperoxia 2?
Oh, 25,000 Hyperoxia 2.
25,000. Yeah. But I mean, that's a pretty big milestone for an indie game.
Yeah, people don't understand that is more than literally 90% of the games on PSN. So,
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why I say, like, I'm perfectly comfortable with my stance that there needs to be way fewer games. And then people are like, well, you're making games, and what about your games? And I'm like, I will stack all of our games up except for the original Perils of Baking against a metric of, you cut half of the games from PSN based on quality and or sales, we will survive easily. So it's not even, and 25,000 is not our highest selling game. Hyperoxia 1 is our best selling game, and that's like almost 35,000, I think. But it goes to show you, it reminds me a lot of like, and you'll know this, cartridge sales back in the day. Like, a game would sometimes sell 50,000 or 100,000, 150,000 copies. That was it. And they would make a wild amount of money on that because the game cost.
That was to sell 100,000 was the dream when we were at Sony ImageSoft. And I remember we were like, could we sell 100,000 at Twisted Metal? Because we didn't know what the PlayStation sales were. We were basing stuff off carts. And yeah, you're right. 100,000. Oh my God.
But that would be the death of you. I mean, look at Pieces Interactive. Where the day we're recording, the guys that made Alone in the Dark, the kind of reboot, they're done.
Shut down.
And right. So the number, I think, is almost 11,000 people this year. And I would have layoffs, and I would think that number is going to look more like 15,000 or more by the end of the year, which is horrifying. And I don't think next year. See, it's just it's an unfortunate nexus of too many games. The space is growing. Like, there's more and more money being made, but it's being consumed and subsumed by just specific products. So there's no growth in like this undergrowth area where it's like, oh, well, I can find my way here, here, and here. It's like, no. That's why with Lilimo, we have no interest in making more than what we're making now, as far as just 8-bit weekend games, basically, and 16 like games that we don't want to demand your time. We don't want to demand your money. We just want to fit in somewhere because we know it's too ambitious to expect anything else. And that's what I was kind of a bummer watching some of those trailers where I was like, damn, dude, some of these games are going to be great and no one's going to play them. There are many, many great games I play that no one plays. I'm surprised sometimes, especially when I come across 2D platformers that I really like.
I played Bat Boy because of you.
Right. Bat Boy is legitimately awesome.
Yeah.
And if it came out 10 years ago when there was more space and time, people would have loved that fucking game. Yeah. And no one knows that game. It's like, no. And that happens all the time. And it's a shame. So what's going to be interesting,
I think, because also Bat Boy, at first I thought what it was like, oh, it's like some kid vampire game.
That's
like,
what it sounds like, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh no, it's sports. Like he's hitting a baseball with a bat. Oh, that's cool. And I thought it was really cool. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. And at the same time, I don't agree with the idea that there isn't, there are always a lot of things that get lost, and that's unfortunate. But I also do think there is I think in a lot of ways what it does is it what is the saying that I'll say it. I don't understand how wheat and bread gets made, but I guess chaff is bad.
Yeah, it's like
the chaff away from the wheat.
Yeah, it's like all the stuff that's not the seed or whatever.
Right. So, I mean, I think fundamentally you're going to have people who wash out because they're not playing the game well, right? I mean, even take Hyperoxia, right? I mean, Hyperoxia is successful and it's a game people like a lot. But I imagine if you were to greenlight a new game like this RPG you're talking about, and I know you haven't given a lot of information there, that's a much more commercially compelling idea that, depending on what it costs and depending on how good it is, that stands to actually make some noise because it's interesting and it's different, but it's not so different that it's like arty-farty to the point that it's abstract. Hyperoxia, I think, is not only do you have to be into retro shooters, but it's not R-Type. It's not an actual retro shooter. It's a new shooter based on I mean, I don't think you would greenlight that today from a standstill, right? If you looked 5 titles, you wouldn't say, but there's a lot of people who do that. They'll make games and it's like, why did you, I mean, it's okay if you made it just because you wanted to make it, but if you're complaining now that it's not selling, like I'm going to look at this list. Which one do you think has, give me a few that you think have the greatest risk of just like no one shows up? Probably Karen, this thing where you're climbing, the climbing game.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely questionable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if people are talking about it and it's like, dude, you've got to fucking sure, I'll show up for it. But there's nothing inherent in that concept that makes me go, oh, I want to play that. That looks really interesting and really, really cool. It just looks like, oh, okay. But let's see, there's probably, and forget licenses, right? Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, of course, but that's because it's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Yeah, unfortunately, I need to see the games again to know which ones are which, but yeah, it seemed like a common thought amongst people being like, damn, like who, it's what you're saying. It's like, you have to have the intention of making it for someone. And
but welcome to fucking life. I mean, welcome to,
sure.
There's no, it's so goofy to me. I see people all the time online saying shit like, and usually it has to do with the DEI stuff, but it could be anything where they're complaining and saying, we just, what we don't like is when all this money, it affects the vision. It's like, dude, it always affects the vision. Every fucking thing that's not a passion project that's self-funded is filled with compromises in order to get the money to pay the people to make the goddamn thing to begin with. Say what you really mean, which is you don't have a problem with it being compromised. You just don't like it being compromised in that way, which is totally fine. But don't try to take a high horse position of, I just want the art to be pure. It's like, well, okay, then go play one-man band indie games on itch.io because you've never played a pure game on a goddamn console because they cost too much to manufacture and make. And so no to whatever you're going to say next. Not you, but these people.
No, I understand.
It's frustrating because it's like, that's not really how it works.
Yeah, you have to separate the idea of like that's what I'm lamenting, I guess, is like the vision on a lot of these games is actually very good. I feel like we are in an era for the first, I guess what I'm saying is I reject the idea that good games rise to the top, that like good games will always be found and they'll find their audience. It's like, no, they fucking won't. It's happening more and more. It's simply a time thing, a discoverability thing, an inclination thing.
Yeah, but it's the problem with that is it actually is kind of a cousin to the everybody has ideas. Ideas are not valuable bullshit that I hate when people say, because good ideas that are good commercial ideas are fucking gold. Yes, of course you have to execute them. You have to execute them well enough to be desirable products. And yes, a great product with a meh idea will always outperform a bad product with a brilliant idea. But when you are trying to stand out from the crowd, an idea that you can grasp that isn't so, it's like that. You've read the book Hitmakers, and if you haven't, I recommend it. But
no, I don't think I have. It sounds
it's basically
familiar.
it's a book about why. It's a number of theories by this one social scientist about why things connect and why things don't. And it's a pretty typical 80-20 rule, but he just goes into lots of scenarios about you don't want to make it too weird that it becomes just so personalized that, and but you also don't want to make it so generic that nobody shows up for it. Right. And so that's, whether it's marketing or a high level designer or a writer or wherever it comes from, the idea of the concept of, or the concept of having an idea, which I know sounds weird, that is not only executable in a professional commercial way, but that is a commercial idea that if you hear it and you go, oh, that's cool, I want to try that, or I'm curious. That's part of what it means to make a good game. Bat Boy, which I liked very, very much, but I only played it because you told me about it. And I'm like, oh, I trust Colin, not because conceptually I'm like, oh, that sounds fascinating. But if somebody were to take, I'm just trying to think, I'm on the spot right now, but if somebody, were to say, this is a game, it's a Souls game. Here's one. I don't know. I'm going to get the genres mixed up, but it's like, oh, I know, like Mixtape which they showed from Annapurna. I'm a kid of the 80s, right? So I like all that music and I like all that stuff. If somebody were to say, hey, this is a John Hughes 80s high school RPG, the RPG is basically Persona 5, not as good, but it's good enough. But it's got all the music and it's got all the tropes and it's basically an 80s, 90s nostalgia porn. I'm like, okay, I'm interested. I want to try that, right? I'm not saying that everybody listening to this podcast wants to try that, but I'm saying that, yeah, you have to include that. You have to bake that into your script, into your game design, into your song. It's why people who make YouTube videos, not streams, but videos, it's like, what's your thumbnail? What's your hook? You got to tease them at the beginning and say, oh, I'm Mr. Beast. I'm going to show you the most expensive home ever made on a landfill. But first, let me show you these 3 things. And then by the time you get to the last thing, it's the job, right? I'm always surprised by a lot of these people who make content for video games and are surprised that when they don't sell. And it's like, did you do that part of the work? It's like, no, I'm just a programmer. I'm like, okay, I get it. But you need to bring somebody in that does that part of the work.
Right. Otherwise, a lot of creatives do not take seriously like the whole marketing.
It's not even, but because they hear marketing and they think commercials.
Right.
It's not so much. It's more of, does the idea have juice? Does it travel on its own without you having to set up a little demo and show people what's great about it?
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's funny, man, because I fucking hate PAX, so I never would have actually given them any of my money. But after what they did to Chris and I, but I think sometimes like what would a Lilimo booth at PAX East do for us if we had like Hybroxia 2?
You're never going to be able to extract your brand from that though. And that's good. But fundamentally, if you want to know if you have a real banger, don't even associate it with you at first.
Yeah, I agree. It's like Stephen King writing under a pen name or J.K. Rowling. Yeah,
and if it works,
I totally agree.
Then fucking throw your thrust behind it. But until then, who knows why they bought it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm happy about with Lilimo is people do buy the games because of my association, or at least have, but they seem to truly like the games in some sense, which is cool. So it's not, we haven't had like the Super Parallels Baking didn't sell well, but I feel like that had a lot working against it. I also just don't think it's a very commercial idea, although I'm really, really proud of that game. I think that game's awesome, but I think the role-playing game, as long as people stay with
that one, I'm very interested in that. So
we can show it to you. I mean, we have it's a ton of stuff. It's like, it's just in need of art assets, like as we wait for all that to be filled in, but the game is fairly constructed. It's just, I just want, like, our big marketing challenge for that game, or at least perception challenge, will just be like, we're not making an old school style game. And I've explained this to you before. We're making a game that you would expect to find on the console. Like, there are no concessions. It's an PS5? No, on in our case, it plays like an early 1991, 1992 SNES
okay. It's like a
JRPG.
SNES game. Okay, gotcha.
And not a late one, like an earlier one. And we want to really like stay in that vision. And as long as people get that, I think they're really going to like it. So
your issue right now is just getting the art made?
Yeah, we contract our art through freelance guys that usually work on multiple projects at the same time. So as
it's 2D art?
It's like all pixel? 2D pixel art, yeah.
I mean, come on, man.
And
Chat GPT.
No, we're not going to do that.
It's so dumb though. I mean, you're going to lose the fight, and eventually you're going to go, my God, Jaffe was right. We should have fucking
You were right about losing, but I just don't want to.
But there's nothing even noble about it. It's just a tool, man. There are people who make shitty AI art, people who make good AI art. There are people who make good pixel shit and bad pixel shit. You still got to have a creative vision sitting there going, how do I make this appealing? How do I tweak it? How do I tune it? It's a mental block that people have that I understand the noble feeling about it. And you're in a tough place because indie games are such that a lot of those people with that mental block are fans of indie games, which means if they find out AI is involved, they'll reject it because they haven't dealt with the mental block. But it is a mental block. It suggests that, unless you're making sure you're not getting art that was stolen, I would never work with a place that trained their stuff on stolen art. But we've had this conversation. We know.
Yeah, the good news about our game is like, it's not even so much about we don't have to worry so much about animations as much as we have to worry about the volume of art. Like
Sure.
even doing palette swapping and all of that, which we do, like, because that's true to form. Yeah, it's just a lot of waiting, but people should envision something that looks kind of like Final Fantasy IV. And I think that will be within reason. And it's surprising because I'm very protective of this game, and I've been shockingly disciplined about not talking about it, which is so funny because I have no discipline.
Well, what I have heard about it from you, I think sounds really cool. And it's like I said, it's like to that point of the conversation, it's one of those things that if someone said, oh, this is this game about XYZ, I'd go, oh, that's kind of cool. Let me see that.
Yeah, I do think the subject matter will differentiate it from all, like pretty much anything you've ever played, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
but that's part of the job, right? That's what you need to do. I mean, maybe it's just because I came up with Sony trying to get green lights, and I was pretty successful getting green lights from Sony. A lot of people struggled. And I just, because I came from a world of wanting to get into film, and I understood high concept, and I understood especially the 80s and 90s high concept with people like Joel Silver, and you just give one elevator pitch and suddenly you've made $1 million off an idea. You know, like the best high concept I ever heard was for the movie Speed, which was like, well, what's it about? Oh, it's this bus that if it slows down below 50 in LA, it blows up and kills everybody on it. And this cop basically sneaks onto the bus and he's got to solve the day. And I'm like, that's a great fucking concept.
Yeah,
I want to see that, you know?
Yeah.
You gotta stand on, hell, it's like, you gotta entertain. People want distraction, entertainment. I think there's nobility in that. I like being part of that, whether it's with a game or a podcast or whatever. I like knowing. I love when people write me and say, I love listening to your shit when I'm at work. It makes the day go faster. Yeah, it makes me happy.
Me too.
Hey, that's kind of cool that I've provided something like that.
Right, because so many people provide that for me too. So it's like, why wouldn't you be in that cycle
proud
as well?
Of it and happy about it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I want to move on to talk about the Xbox conference in a minute.
Yeah.
But I want to, before we get there, I want to return to something that we said earlier on, because I did want to ask you this at the top and we just never had an angle to get it in.
Yeah.
Why? So about Horizon, because I know you're really down on it. A lot of people are really down on Horizon. I think comparable to sales numbers and critical acclaim, it seems to be the most dissonant of all Sony products, and perhaps all first-party products in the entire ecosystem, like the entire core gaming ecosystem out of any of the three companies. Do you think that there's some bias towards it because of Herman Hulst? Because that's you don't think so?
Well, I mean, I don't know Herman. Herman doesn't have a bad reputation to be biased about. I have heard stories that, and again, these are stories. I don't have firsthand accounts, so I'm just telling you what I've heard. I've heard stories that he wasn't the most gracious of losers when God of War 2018 seemed to be getting more of the heat and more of the sales and more of the awards. But whatever. He's passionate about his shit. Good for him, right? But I don't hear a lot of people speaking negatively about Herman, and I can tell you, I fundamentally have a almost physical dislike for Horizon, and it's got nothing to do with Herman Hulst.
Yeah. Well, I just asked you that. It almost sounded accusatory on his part. I didn't mean it like that. It's like, I'm trying to get to the bottom of why people think there's like basically a conspiracy about this game, right? That it's not, it sells extraordinarily well. I think it's the second best selling PlayStation IP ever, actually, for per game. So only 2 core games, right? And 35 million, I think, copies sold.
Sure,
or something
but the
like
second
that,
one didn't do as well as the first, right? But that's,
And they also hurt. Actually in the Insomniac Weekly, we learned that they intentionally put it on PS Plus to learn about it, and they killed its sales. So who knows how much it would have sold, but they learned that they shouldn't do that.
And it's fucking gorgeous. It's so well made. Beautiful game. Controls great. Yeah, it's a gem of a title, but I hate it.
It's so interesting, yeah, because and by the way, with that knowledge known from the leak and what they did with PS Plus and Forbidden West, you can almost understand Jim Ryan going on the stand during the FTC trial and saying, like, as we understand, they're losing a lot of money on Game Pass, because he might be looking at that and being like, well, we just lost $100 million,
right? Right.
By putting this thing in PS Plus, not even day and date, by the way, which is crazy. So imagine how much money they would have lost if they did that. But that aside, I guess what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is, because I agree with you, I hear things behind the scenes about people from time to time, and no one has anything bad to say about Herman Hulst. And in my own experience with him, just as a media person, he's always been nice to me.
Yeah, but you asked the question, so you must. Why would that even enter your mind?
Because I don't understand. Because Horizon does seem to be getting preferential treatment And I'm wondering where that's coming from. It's like,
sure.
okay, so
that's probably coming from Herman.
Yeah, that's what I mean is, and
but I don't think that's
been,
where people don't like it. But sure, I mean, you can see that all the time. That's why.
Yeah, okay, I should have been more clear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we saw that with Phil Harrison. Whenever whoever's running the ship, I think Shuhei was probably the best of really being fair. But whoever's running the ship, their local territory would get preferential treatment. I don't even know how conscious it was, but just because you're swimming in that soup more frequently, that you understand it better and you understand the vision better and you understand what it could be better than just like, oh, I flew to America and I saw 7 games from all the studios and I flew back, and it's just, I don't know how much of it is a conscious thing versus just proximity. But I know we saw it with Phil Harrison. You see it with people getting promoted. You see it with it's Sony anyway, and you see it with games that get greenlit. Like look, there was look at SingStar. I remember SingStar could do no wrong, and I get that SingStar in London or the UK or the European territories was a big deal. It was a profitable title, but nobody gave a shit about SingStar in Japan or America. But you would have thought by the amount of stage time and press time that they shoved onto it, you would have thought that it was, fucking God of War.
Yeah.
And, and I'm like, SingStar, we're going to have to sit through this for 30 fucking minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
It's always been that way.
Yeah.
It's always been that way.
Yeah. It's I should have been more clear about what I was saying about Herman. So I'm sorry about that. It's interesting because I think it's fairly obvious that there must be some sort of bias there too. Intrinsic to the situation. I would, of course, like you said, I would be biased if like Broxia if Lilimo got purchased and we joined this like indie publisher, and then like I would give preferential treatment to my games. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but again, and some of it wouldn't even be conscious.
Right.
You just get the value of it because you're swimming in it.
Right. That's well said.
More than something. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I'm just fascinated, I guess, and I wanted to ask you about what you see as the dissonance, if you do see a dissonance between what I see is smash commercial success of Horizon and Horizon 2 as a unit, and the critical success of both of those games. They were both killed, I think, by Zelda in their own way. They might have even been bigger, which is funny because they both happen to have come out near a Zelda game, which was just unfortunate.
That's so bizarre, but yeah.
I really do love the games. I actually think the second one's even better than the first one. I think the combat is fucking amazing. The world, the dinosaur robots and all, it's awesome. It's dope. Aloy I can do with or without, but that's not uncommon for me in my experience with fiction. I don't really play a lot of these games for the characters. I play for the world and the story and the lore.
I do as well, but that, you know what it might be? That's a game, at least I'm thinking of the second one now, Forbidden West, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know they've put out a patch where she doesn't talk as much, which I know sounds so sexist. It's not like, it's not a day without a woman patch.
I know. Oh my God, shut up.
Yeah. But it's just like the first hour of that game was so plotting and so many people talking, and it was so overly earnest. And if you hadn't already bought into it, like maybe if you came to it direct, it's like, okay, I was watching The Lord of the Rings and it picks up immediately Two Towers where Lord of the Rings, unless you were just like, to you, it doesn't feel like a sequel. It just feels like a continuation of the first game. And it didn't for me because I barely played the first game. It's just like, oh, shut up. Not just her, but all the people in the village, and the little kid comes up to her. And it's just like, and then finally when you get control, it's like, she's telling you everything to do. Go here. Maybe I should go up there. Maybe I should fucking go fuck myself at this. By the time I got to the open world, when I rode that elevator down into the wasteland or whatever the fuck it was.
Right.
I even though I had that great initial boss fight against that first dinosaur, I was just tired of it. And then on top of it, I just think she's such an obnoxious looking character. I don't mean, I'm not one of these, like, I don't care if a character is attractive, like societally speaking. If they're incredibly unattractive, I'll play a game as Gollum. I don't give a fuck. Not that game because it's terrible, but I don't need a character to be somebody I want to have sex with to say that's a good character. But there's just something about her design that feels so, just she's the first video game character that has that face that you want to punch.
That's so interesting. There are
people
agree.
in the world that people say that, like, it's like, okay,
totally.
People say that about my face. Yeah. It's like, I got nothing against him personally. I just want to punch him in the fucking face. I would never hit anybody unless they hit me first. But I'd love to punch the shit out of that face.
Wow.
There's just something about it.
That's so interesting.
I hate her.
It's so funny, man, because did you play the VR?
The best thing that can happen to Aloy is an industrial accident that changes the way she looks, and they have to give her reconstructive surgery, and she's totally different. Then I'll fucking show up, Herman.
I wonder if they feel an eagerness to get away from her, and I don't think they do. Because they're obviously going to have to do a third game, but will they continue it beyond that arc? But then they have her
better,
in this.
She's already better. She's already better in Lego. I'm not even fucking with you, and I'm not making a joke about the fact that if you look at the press write-ups for Horizon Lego, it's not a small number that mention this sense of levity and lightness is exactly what this franchise has needed, right? So I never played the Horizon games and felt they were this somber Last of Us ordeal, but there was something that felt so obnoxiously earnest and unearned about their tone that I think that affected people that don't like it. I'm not saying it affected everybody. Clearly, like you said, it was a smash, but I
wonder, because there's a lot of theories that the numbers are majorly overinflated because of bundles and all of that. And I'm like, I don't really think so. I think the game is just big. Yeah. It's like Avatar in some sense where it's like, it's like everyone seems to kind of fucking hate it. Yeah. Yet here, it is.
Nobody's dressing up as Aloy for Halloween, but you are seeing Kratoses and you are seeing Ellies and Joels, but you ain't seeing Aloys.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like, did you play the VR game by chance?
No.
Okay, so I asked just because she's comically small in it because you're another character, and so you see her in it. And so thinking of you punching her face in is so funny to me because if you saw how small they render her, like I think she's literally supposed to be like 5'1" or something like that. Like,
well, then I want to pick her up and cuddle her. Then maybe she's great.
Yeah,
but
hold her like a baby.
Yeah, I think she's a terrible character design, and I like Ashley Birch. I like her performances on a number of characters. It's nothing against her. I just think whoever was guiding that part of the franchise, they might be incredibly talented, but this was a swing and a miss in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny because the guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but he worked at Obsidian and he wrote New Vegas and then he wrote the first Horizon game and then he left. So I don't think he was even involved in the second one. I can't remember his name. It's an Hispanic guy, I think. And yeah, so maybe that has something to do with kind of losing her voice a little bit because I don't remember people being that annoyed by her in the first one. I think people were like, oh, this isn't as good as a lot of people think it is, but it wasn't so much about her until the second one. Then people seemed really annoyed.
But a lot of it was she wouldn't stop talking. And I get the problem. I mean, because I had the problem with God of War Ragnarok where, I so get it, man. I mean, and I don't mean people are stupid where they can't solve puzzles or they don't know what to do. People are distracted. They're, whether they come home from work and they don't want to think, or they are a kid playing it over the summer and they want to get lost in it. The game isn't dynamically adjusting based on the player. And so it's got to be a one size fits all, unless you want to go in and start tinkering with all the sliders, which most people don't even know are there. And so I get the hurdle or I get the wall that they're up against or the barrier, which is if we make this too much of a puzzle, which will satisfy someone like me who wants to settle in for a real gaming session, we're going to lose all the people that bought it because they thought the commercial looked cool in the Super Bowl. And suddenly like, what the fuck is this? How am I supposed to solve a puzzle where the axe rotates or ricochets off the mirror? And what the fuck are you talking about? So I understand why they probably had Atreus not shutting up about how to solve puzzles. And I understand how they would have got to a conclusion from focus tests going, we need to have her explain where to go. But one size doesn't fit all. And until they do have dynamic AI based adjusting, which is coming, it's already there in a lot of games, some extent, the more they spend, the harder it's going to be to avoid that, right? I mean, can you imagine making a game that you want it to be successful, that you have to have successful because it costs $300 million, and then a designer coming up with a great, slide the mirror puzzle in order to open I mean, I'm curious how Indiana Jones is going to do it, because Indiana Jones, literally in the trailer, there are some little puzzles, like almost look like cell phone game puzzles, where you're putting things in holes and, matching shapes and stuff. I mean, I'm sure there are people who were like, that's too hard for me. I don't know.
I love machine games. I'm
excited for that game. Yeah,
I'll play
it.
But
I'm excited. But I'll go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say it might have been, depending on like reception of it and whatever, because I don't really follow Xbox games production throughout, so I'm not watching shit and seeing it. So I'm a little more surprised one way or the other when a game comes out. Like, I really thought Starfield was gonna be excellent. Like excellent. So I'm often just totally out of whack with what's going on there. So if that game ended up being good when it came to Xbox, I might have actually bought that on Xbox to play it, because I really do like Indiana Jones, although I'm out of modern Indiana Jones. I don't really give a shit about that. But now that it's and I'm not trying to be a dickhead, but it's going to come to PlayStation. So I'm going to wait, so kind of knowing that this is kind of the bind that Phil has put us in like saying too much, but not saying enough, where I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to wait. Although they probably want me to wait, because they're going to get my full $70 off me at that point, and not a Game Pass subscription.
I've said over and over, I mean, the sooner they can put everything everywhere, the more valuable Game Pass will be to people who are into Game Pass. Because you're going to spend $70 to play indie, and I'm going to spend $15 to play indie, and all the other shit.
We need each other. It's going to turn into it's a very reciprocal relationship that's going to develop, I think, between PlayStation and Xbox, and PlayStation players and Xbox players. And that to reach the AAA standards you need on Xbox for Game Pass without selling a la carte titles, you'll need that money somewhere. It'll supplement, the PlayStation people will get it later and supplement that money. That money will go back into the ecosystem and allow all.
You're right. Or you're going to need, my guess is what they're betting on. Like, I see two paths for them. I see either what they've said, which is, maybe we just become the biggest fucking third-party publisher on the planet. And or I see a lot of PlayStation people coming to a point where they say the PlayStation output is anemic. And look it up before you come at me. Anemic is not bad in terms of the quality. It's a slow drip. There's not a lot of it. And so the idea of spending $70 over and over and over versus, I just think you're going to see a lot of PlayStation gamers next generation go, is it really worth that for me? And that's how I would respond. I can't tell you how the market's going to respond, but for me, it's a no-brainer. But fundamentally, though, right now, you're right. If it stays the way it is, sure, that money will go towards making more of these, and maybe they can have their cake and eat it too. But a lot of it is still, I mean, I thought the Xbox show was great.
Yeah, let's talk about it. That's what I was going to talk about next. I agree. So give me your thoughts on that.
Well, so I think, but I'm it's very easy for me to separate the show from the product, because I've been burned way too much by this company just because they put out some great trailers, right? So, and then after the show, somebody sent me their, kind of like, how Marvel, Marvel, whenever they say, here's our new slate,
right?
And they release like a 3-year infographic of, so it was the same thing. It's like, here's now all the Xbox stuff. And most of this stuff is stuff we've seen to some degree. It's not like stuff that's like, well, okay, if South of Midnight ever comes out. Well, we've seen South of Midnight now. We've seen it running. It may not be great, but we've seen it running. It looks pretty cool.
I think it looks cool.
Yeah. So you look at that amount of output and you go, all the trailers they showed were good. I thought, most of them. And if everything they showed is pretty darn good, like a 7.5 or an 8 up to a classic, I think they are on the road to becoming pretty unstoppable when it comes to, Apple could stop them, Amazon could stop them, Tencent could stop them. I don't think, I posted the other day that after watching Ubisoft's thing, I said Sony should buy Ubisoft, and everybody got all pissy at me. And I'm just like, guys, nobody cares about the nuance. They're just fucking teams. All they care about is their fucking team. It drives me batshit. But what I was saying is to compete if Game Pass works, or not even Game Pass, but if Microsoft works, even if a third party, the amount of output, the scope is now a big part of that. And we have seen Sony struggling to deliver as much content as clearly their fans want. And so to buy a company like Ubisoft, I'm not saying Ubisoft makes the best games ever. I do happen to think that Assassin's Creed Shadows looks cool. I thought Star Wars looks cool, but people who played it said it's just kind of eh.
Yeah, that's surprising to me because it looks great.
Yeah, I was disappointed. But to have Sony with another company that can pretty much run itself and put out 4 or 5 games a year that are of good enough quality, why would you not want that for your box? I wasn't, but people got all mad at me. I'm like, fine, guys, stick to a company that, not because they're bad, they're great, but because of they only have so many developers, you're not going to get as much stuff as you want.
Yeah, I think, don't you think well, I identified this and I thought it was pretty interesting. And I wonder what you think of it. You probably noticed too, because you have a great eye for this stuff. Is Sony's kind of changing the way they approach second party games in order to extract more out of better developers. I had pointed this out to people because people were like, oh, this started with the original Neo. And I'm like, it really didn't, because Neo has always been owned by Koei Tecmo and it was published by Koei Tecmo in Japan. Sony acted as international publisher of both of those games.
Yeah.
And you know this well, Sony would never.
Like God of War was published by Capcom in Japan. Right. So I mean yeah.
So what I was going to say, and I think you'll know this well, is like Sony would never publish a game and not own the IP until
back in the day.
Back in the day. But Stellar Blade, they don't own, and they don't have I don't think they even have. There's going to be a PC version that's not published by them and all that kind of stuff. It sounds like, and
Death Stranding,
they own Death Stranding. Rise of the Ronin is the other one they don't own.
They own, even though 505 published the PC,
yeah,
so
like
they let them
Sony has the IP rights and I guess the console publishing rights, and then they
got it
because that deal happened in the pre PC era. Like I think Sony probably wishes that they didn't make that deal with 505 games. So I just think it's interesting. Like I went and looked on the USPTO and I was like, oh, who owns Stellar Blade? And it's like, oh, Shift Up. Who owns Rise of the Ronin? Oh, Koei Tecmo. So I guess Sony is kind of realizing that they need to play nicer with partners and be more flexible in order to extract more second party games that will fill those gaps. Because I think that they realize that. That's why I think this year has actually been surprisingly strong, in my opinion. What's
been really great about it, and I think this is one of the reasons I like Xbox so much. I'm going to struggle with this, so bear with me for a brief moment. Mm-hmm. But okay. So if you go back to before PS5, started in PS4, I imagine, there wasn't this demand that everything first party released be game of the year. Things could come out from first party Sony or Nintendo or Xbox that, were like, there was variety there, and sometimes it worked for you and sometimes it didn't. And then because things took so long to make and got so expensive, everything had to be like, you're only eating a meal, once a week. So it better be a fucking good meal, kind of thing. And what I like, even though I haven't played Ronin and I only played the demo of Stellar Blade, and I liked what I played, I like that both them and Xbox with Xbox's show, like it seems like there's a bit of a return to everything doesn't have to be so polished for us to put it out. It can just be good, right? And I think that air out of the tire is a good thing for games, right? I think most people would look at Stellar Blade and Ronin and go, if those were first party, those would never be ready to release. There's no fucking way they would release either one of those games in those states. Not that they're bad games, but there are graphic issues, there are user issues in terms of difficulty spikes and this, that, they wouldn't do it. It's kind of cool that, we're not going to get back to the days of like Bloody Roar and Cool Borders, but it's kind of cool that there are that second party mentality that allows them to do that. And I think that's why I like the Xbox show. It was like, oh, it's kind of cool to have a first party, just like, hey, here's this month's game. 6 weeks later, here's a new game. Here's a new, we haven't had that in a long, long time, which is why I think that Sony needs more developers, whether they, grow them organically, which they don't have time to do, or they buy them. If you're going to want your AAA first party games to have the cadence of a release that the games had in PS4 era and before, which is clearly what gamers want, where you're going to have to sacrifice sometimes quality like Stellar Blade and Rise, or sometimes money by buying some other people. So I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's really about, because you've always had that taste with Game Pass, in my opinion, of like you're willing to sacrifice the 50-hour AAA games. You don't even really want them as much as you want the rotisserie of smaller offerings that something like Game Pass.
I'll take a big game if it interests me. I just think they what I thought was really interesting, and I know we're all over the place, and I apologize,
all good,
but it's my brain. Was the developers of Call of Duty Black Ops 6 were asked about, hey, did you guys know we're going to be on Game Pass? And they said, well, we didn't know until relatively recently, but we knew it was a real possibility. And in that, they have changed their onboarding. They have changed a number of things because they know that they're going to get a bunch of new people who have never played it, or people who have returned who haven't played it in a long time. And suddenly the way they develop and the way they design that first 5 minutes, about 5 hours, whatever, matters a lot more than it did a year ago, where you bought the game, maybe you can return it, but probably not. You'll stick with us for at least 5-6 hours before it gets good. That's the stuff that I think is brilliant about these services, that it's not that I don't love big budget AAA games. It's that I think they're bloated. And I think a service like this, I mean, when you've got the Call of Duty guys going, the biggest franchise in the world, other than maybe GTA going, we're having to make some changes because we got to get butts and seats and keep them there. And selling with a subscription service, it's a different thing because it's easy to walk away. I think gamers should be celebrating that, but gamers seem very defensive about those changes. And I'm like, guys, they're making the games better. What they're telling you is they were lazy before. They were willing to bore you because they knew there's nothing you could do about it.
Yeah, you were captive in some sense.
Yeah, it's like, don't you want that? No. Okay.
Yeah, well, you and I have talked about this in the past, and actually, and Mr. Matty plays.
Yeah, but now we have the fucking developer of the biggest franchise in the world literally saying, because we're on Game Pass, we're actually doing the stuff you and I have talked about.
Well, I read that interview and I totally pulled the same thing out. I thought it was fascinating. It's like, yeah, we have to focus on these things we didn't really give a shit about because we have customers, but now we're going to have players, which is a different concept. But Matty on his channel interviewed Todd Howard, and Todd had said that Starfield has 14 million players. But if you look at the achievements, that means fewer than 2 million of them beat it. And to me, I think that if all of these things are true, then there's really no need to make a game like Starfield, in my opinion. Like, you should
what do you mean specifically? What do you mean a game like Starfield?
Like a huge bloated, and bloated's a loaded term, a huge game, like with just tons of content. If it's all about just bouncing around, which it seems like that's what Game Pass's core is, like the idea of just playing and absorbing and not really sticking around. I know he said the average player plays for 40 hours, but the achievement, and I believe him, but the achievements do speak for themselves. Like, there's a bunch of people that don't even get to level 10 and like do all the these basic things. And so,
you're right.
Well, so I was just saying that in my mind, all of this kind of conflicts. Like, there needs to be an answer to that's why I think Call of Duty is vital. It's like the most vital thing. It's like, this is the literal definition of proof of concept of something working. But if bouncing around is what matters, then Bethesda Game Studio should really be working on just a bunch of smaller products, because those are the things that matter most to Game Pass. Could you have it all? Yes, but then you're going to have this situation, much like the streaming services have now in film and television, where certain things are paying for other things. If you want to have that imbalance, right, and you're willing to do that, then that's fine. But it just seems tenuous. That's my major concern with it. They're not movies and TV shows. They're games.
Well, right. But what I would say on I mean, it's hard to extract when you say some things are paying for other things. The other things that are being paid for that may not be lucrative on their own often can become lucrative as it relates to the brand in general. So yeah, Netflix might have a bunch of shows that most people don't watch, but the narrative of look at all these shows on Netflix, and a couple of them I watch that no one else does, but I love, there is a great value in that in terms of keeping people subscribing, getting people to subscribe, even though some show, the latest Kathy Bates sitcom where she runs a pot dispensary, which is a real thing. It's a funny show. Nobody watches it. May not make any money, but as part of the message of Netflix, it contributes.
Sure.
I would
Yeah,
imagine.
it's like a puzzle piece. I totally get that approach. Well, let's talk more about the Xbox Showcase since you.
But I do want to talk about Starfield briefly.
Okay,
And I think it's what I think is that the art form will adjust to the business model, which we've talked about, right? So it may be that, first off, it may be that once you take the bloat out of this shit anyway, because you no longer have to worry about, well, what if you play it and take it back to GameStop, or it may be that the games adjust anyway naturally because there are games that I love that I have 600 hours on Marvel Snap. I love that I have games that are evergreen, but if we're talking single player games and you're not talking games where the grind is part of the fun, like a RPG, does Last of Us Part 2 really need to be as long as it was?
No, that was the worst part of it was its length.
God of War is the same thing. Spider-Man 2 is the same thing. So I think maybe what you'll get is I saw also Todd Howard saying that they're hoping to have yearly drops of DLC for Starfield. Like they're coming out with the new one, which I didn't think looked great, but whatever, this Christmas or whenever. Maybe what they'll do is it's like, every year or every 18 months, you'll get a 4-hour Spider-Man adventure. Okay, that's cool. And maybe every now and then you'll have somebody come along who's like, I want to make this epic. And there's value in them having that on the service or in a box. But more often than not, I think you would be hard pressed to convince most people that single player narrative games, which is one of my favorites, are not too long. They're just most of them. I mean, can you name many that are a good length?
It's very unusual for me to play a game like I thought Dead Space Remake was the perfect length.
That was yes. People a lot of times cite that era, the 8 to 12 hour. What was it like 2005 to 2000? Yeah,
2005 to 2012. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah,
it seems like that's the sweet spot. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I can't think of. God, I get turned off by even the new Elden Ring thing coming out this week, the DLC. I love Elden Ring, my favorite game of all time, but I don't want another. There's so much more to play now that's beginning to be the siren's call that I'd rather have more variety in my diet than just gorge on one thing for 4 months.
Yeah.
But that may just be me. It may be age. I don't know.
I bounce back and forth. I usually I'll platinum a game or stick with a game for 50 hours or play deeply, and then I'll go play a couple smaller products. But I'm a big believer generally of beating the games I play. If I really am not inclined to, I won't, but I try to stick with games. So I play fewer games, but I think I play them more completely than
why?
What'd you say? Why?
Do you enjoy that process? I know you like trophy hunting, but do you feel compelled to beat the games you play because it brings you joy and happiness as a customer, or because you've got some sort of sense of, I just have to kind of complete it?
I think it's multiple things. I think that both of those things are part of it. I also think I've definitely platinumed games I didn't like. I've definitely loved games so deeply that I didn't care about the trophies in them at all. And
so I think one of those is great. One of those I think is a problem that I wish people could break out of.
Right, but isn't it just, this goes into like the right and wrong way of playing a game.
Yeah, people can do whatever the fuck they want. I would never stop them.
I think, in my opinion, Jaffe, because it's even more things than that. It really depends on the game, and I often think it's like a permutation. You know, like how sometimes a role playing game represents its statistics on that weird graph that's like oddly shaped, and it'll be like strength.
Oh, like the triangle.
Yeah. Each game I play is a different thing of different permutations of like, okay, sheer enjoyment, curiosity, completionism, whatever the case might be. And one of the things I really enjoy about beating games and seeing them all the way through is having the satisfaction of knowing, like, I know this game. Like, I can.
Oh,
when
yeah.
you get
I mean,
like Animal Well is a great example. Like people were annoyed about me because I kept calling it pretentious, and I was like, well, most of you have gotten nowhere in the game. I platinumed it. I saw the game many meta levels deep, so I can say what I at least have a valuable opinion. And so there's a piece of that too. Like I like to look.
I think that's great because it clearly brings you genuine satisfaction. I think it's like that. I think, yeah, go with God, man. I'm a fan. I think for me, it's more of when I hear people talk about, I feel compelled to complete it, or I feel, how can you stop reading a book midway through? You've already started. I'm like, because it's boring. But if you're engaged, if that RPG graph, even one of those little buttons is being pinged and you're being given joy, oh, that's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of it's engineering. Like I've always loved beating games since I was a little kid, but I think being in IGN specifically and reviewing games and having that kind of access, like you were expected to beat the games you played to be able to review them and to talk about them and all that. And I do think that as a pundit or whatever, there's some value in me just having a catalog of games I've beaten and continue to play them all the way through, to be able to at least speak to something as well, even if in a more casual era of my life, I might have bounced off of a game, you know?
Well, you and I are the opposite in terms of what we have chosen to value as pundits, right? If that's the right word, I think it is. For me, I want to be able to talk about everything,
right? Like a breadth
as
of
much
games.
as I can.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean I can't also get into the weeds with a lot of things, but certainly not like you can, right? With getting into the weeds. And so, yeah, I think it's actually quite fascinating because I love when I hear somebody really, dive into a nuance of a game that I know I'll never get to or finish. But at the same time, I like the fact that anybody who calls into my show and is like, hey, I was just playing Crow Country or County, whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah, that's supposed to be great.
Yeah,
someone was recommending that to me. I
was like, I played that for about 6 hours. Didn't finish it. We'll never finish it, but I can have a conversation with you about
Sure.
it. I dig that, but I'll never tell you how it ends because I don't fucking know.
Well, that's yin and yang. That's why you and I we work and we're friends for so many reasons, I think, but there is a different approach that's very complementary.
I can see that. I can totally see that. Xbox. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just going to say, I do want to get to the Xbox conference. I was just going to say, I think it leads into the fact that I really play on one console. And what I think people don't understand is that I've always done that. And the times that I didn't do that, were the least satisfying moments of my gaming. And we talked about the PS2 era when I finally had money and I had a Dreamcast, a PS2, an Xbox, and a GameCube. And I was like, I loved the GameCube especially, but I was like, I don't know any of you very well. I know the GameCube very well, but I don't know any of you other guys as well as I would. But when I was a little kid and I had an NES, I knew that thing, every inch of that fucking console, and the SNES. And then onward, when I got my job and became a PlayStation editor, I kind of was able to fall back into that comfortable habit and found great satisfaction in it. People are like, oh, Colin, it's not even that I can't obviously afford any of these things. We have fucking 2 Xbox Series X's in my house, hooked up to 2 TVs. We have Switches and all these kinds of things. I just don't want to play on them. It's just like, we are very yin and yang and like, in that,
I mean, because in my space, I don't see consoles, just like color.
Yeah. You're console blind.
I just see the games.
Console blind. Mm-hmm.
I'll go wherever the games are cool, man. But I get. But
it's not. See, what people don't understand is that it's not like Colin. I think there's an interpretation of like Colin thinks that these are the best games, that there are no games for him elsewhere. And it's like, no, you don't understand. I think
you've explained it very well. I think they probably just don't want to hear what you're saying.
Right. I'm like so OCD and fixated on something and want to know it so well that I don't want to waste time. Like if we were on Mars and we had like an extra 2 hours a day or something like that, then maybe I'd be able to fit in.
Does that apply to other parts of your life or just games?
No, it does. Like, I mean, it's I watch
can you cook one meal really great, but you suck at everything else?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it would be more like consumption of media. Like I watch every Jets game. The Jets can be good. The Jets can be bad. They can be relevant or irrelevant. I haven't missed a game in years. I watch every Islanders game, that I can anyway. There were seasons when I was a young Yankee fan, where I watched all 162 games,
Wow.
Because I'm really tuned in like that. Like that would be a tradition to turn on Yes Network.
But it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I like it because then you really, it's like, I really knew the Yankee 2005 season. I knew it.
Right.
I saw it. And I there's something satisfying about that. It's almost like primary sourcing and having been there, in some sense. And and I love the things that I learned. Like I recently played and beat System Shock for the first time, which is a game I would never have touched when I was a kid. And Ion Fury I platinumed recently, which was awesome.
That's a great. Well, Ion Fury was in early access forever, so I haven't gone back since it became the official game, but I loved it. The sequel I hear is not very good.
Yeah, we were talking about that on a recent show. I didn't realize that it's not, like Void Point made the first one, and I think Slipgate Ironworks is making the second one, and apparently the new one is all fucked up. Because it was Ben that told me, don't play it. Like, just wait, because it's not anywhere in an appropriate shape. All right, let's talk about, because we tried to bring it up several times. I do want to hear your thoughts on it. The Xbox conference. I thought it was excellent. I think arguably the greatest press conference style thing that's happened all generation. Yeah. And you and I don't differ on that at all. I think you and I both agree on that. What I wonder is if it matters. And this is, we are going to see in real time if it matters or not. Like to me, I feel like it's a little too late. As I said earlier, Call of Duty is going to make or break Game Pass, not any of this stuff, you know?
Sure.
And so what do you think? Go ahead.
No, keep going. I'm thinking out loud.
Well, I was like, there's no denying the games look great. I'm going to play Doom. Obviously Gears looks awesome. I'm a big fan of the early Gears games. I'm not caught up. So I feel like I could comfortably play that game when that comes out. And it's some of the South by Midnight or whatever the hell that game's called. That game I think looks really cool art style and animation style. There's no doubt that they have things cooking. I just feel like if Starfield didn't matter and Halo Infinite didn't matter, then why would South by Midnight matter? That's kind of like my approach. And so I just don't think it's going to be effective, but we'll see. What do you think?
So I think it was a show of trailers, right? So there's two parts of it. The first part is, I agree with your take that it was probably the best show we've seen this generation. It was just excellent. But I also know that, watching a bunch of trailers back to back is very, very different. And I know you know this too, than actually having the experience, right? So there wasn't a single game, like if we go through some of the big games, Doom, I'm genuinely excited about because the pedigree of the team has already made 2 of those kinds of games and it looks great. And it's, they know what they're doing. And if you read the interview with the lead designer who was talking about the changes that you're going to get with Doom, what is it called?
The Dark Ages?
Dark Ages, yeah. He's talking, he's really into the weeds, which I appreciate about the moment-to-moment gameplay, saying if the last game was more about verticality and more about, okay, I'm running out of ammo, so I have to figure out which one of these guys to kill. And when I kill that type of enemy, it's going to give me ammo. This kind's going to give me health. Now he's talking about more of it being like old school Doom, where you're able to weave in and out between projectiles and slowing the projectiles down. And he says it's more like a tank, especially with the shield, and you can melee projectiles. And Alexa, stop. And it really is like you go, okay, these guys know what the fuck they're doing, right? So that game I'm excited about. But a lot of the other games, even Indiana Jones, like I love machine game games. They rarely miss. They haven't made that many games, but they're from the Starbreeze team. They rarely missed. Other than that Wolfblood game, Machine Games really doesn't miss. But I will say that if it wasn't for Indiana Jones, because most of that trailer was a cutscene, right? If it wasn't for the brand, I would look at it and go, well, I like high adventure stuff. That's kind of cool looking. But fundamentally, I don't think the trailer really was that great. It was just the fact that it's indie and the fact that it's Machine Games, right? But then you can kind of, South of Midnight has a great art style, but We Happy Few had a great art style, and it was a great concept. But the game itself visually looks really good. The combat looks like not as up to par as most third-person combat games. Like when she was fighting that thing after she killed it, all the flowers bloomed. It was like, again, I'm not knocking it. I'm excited for it. It looks like a neat new IP, but I'm just saying that, there wasn't anything they showed, or it wasn't that they showed a lot that when you really think about them as games, you go, that's going to be fucking awesome to play. There were a few, and the others, I think the jury is still out. And I remember, like I said, being very burned on Redfall, because Redfall last year, Pete Hines goes on stage, does a deep dive, and I'm like, this sounds great. And he's like, if you love all the Arcane Studio stuff, you can have that, but you also can have it with your friends or have it solo. And I'm like, this is fucking great. And he knew he was full of shit, because this wasn't years before it came out. This was like 4 months before the thing dropped. He knew the state that fucking game was in. So the proof will be in the pudding. But what I will say, though, is when you say, will it matter? I think, let's assume most of the games they showed, like I said, are an 8, 7.5 to an 8 at worst, right? That South by Midnight genuinely is fun and good. And Doom, we know, is going to be great. And Indie, even if you stripped out the brand Indie, it still is a fucking awesome action adventure game, blah, blah, blah. I think at that point, then you're looking at a company that is able to somehow, and they've never shown a proclivity for this, to manage all of these home run hitting studios and drop titles at a frequent cadence. Whether or not they turn the tide for the hardware of Xbox Series X is irrelevant. You are talking now about a behemoth of a publisher, however they get their content to the world, the likes of which we have never seen. It is kind of the equivalent of the drop cadence of first party PS2, but everything is a AAA game, right? But is that going to happen? Probably not. Do I trust Matt Booty to fucking deliver a pizza, let alone deliver a AAA game, let alone a whole slate of them? No, because, but if they do it, it'll matter. It may not matter to hardware right now, but it'll fucking matter. Can you imagine a publisher that can actually pull off that slate? I mean, that's like Kevin Feige level of amazement.
Yeah, this is the promise of having so many teams and just being able to manage them and make great games. It's, better than anyone, not easy. So to make something great.
I mean, right. That's why I've always been kind of confused why you've got this, it's kind of like, let's, you're better than I am on all these historical references, but I imagine, it's like, let's fight the bad guys who are invading. And it's like, you send out a bunch of Cub Scouts. It's like, well, your vision is great, but you're sending Cub Scouts to fight Attila the Hun. What are you doing?
Right.
You got people you could hire, but anyway, that's my, so I think it'll make a huge difference if they can pull it off. It may not make a difference to the hardware, but at that point, I mean, like I said, imagine if they could pull it off.
Yeah, it would be amazing. I guess that's because you're right, Jaffe, that, and we've said it, like that they're basically becoming the biggest publisher in the core games industry, and will be the biggest publisher on PlayStation, just between Minecraft and Call of Duty alone. That's a pretty dominant position to stake on your competitor's platform. Nonetheless, all the other stuff that you'll ultimately bring over and have already brought over. So I'm not.
It's not a bad consolation prize.
No, it's not. That's what's funny is that and I should be more careful with my words, I guess, in the sense that what I'm talking about is it won't matter to the trajectory of the brand as it's currently constituted, because that seems to be a die cast, and they might actually end up in the long run having the last laugh of having bailed out at that time and becoming what Microsoft has always been, which is a completely agnostic software provider. From the very beginning with IBM PCs, it wasn't just IBM PCs, it was IBM compatibles. Like anything that wasn't a fucking Apple computer, they would run their software on. And ultimately they ran on Apple early and then went back later. So they just understand what time it is. I think that's what Satya and what his kind of his influence on this situation has been, which is like, this is who we actually are. Like this was actually the example against the current within Microsoft always. And that's because that's the way you guys play over there. But we don't want to play that way anymore. And so I have no doubt that what will come out of it is some brand like Microsoft Gaming. And I don't know if they stay with the Xbox branding ultimately in the long term. I have no idea. And it will become the biggest publisher in the world. Like there's no doubt about that. But that's a different Xbox than, and so I'm saying like, that's a great outcome. That might be the ideal outcome. And all the R&D you cut out of that and the people you court into that and selling everywhere and just meeting people where they are is very advantageous when Sony's really going to be permanently locked to PlayStation. I think the minute Sony might inevitably have to bring their games over in a major way to like Switch 2 and PC. I think, let me cut into myself and interrupt myself here and ask you this. Do you think PlayStation would release games on Xbox, or do you think that that's like never going to happen? Because it seems impossible to imagine, yet they would probably have something to gain by doing it. It would just be risky.
No, I don't think there's anything to gain right now because the hardware is.
Yeah, like you would let them falter, right? And not give them a hand.
Well, yeah. I mean, why would you not? I mean, I'm not saying be an asshole, but I mean, Switch makes sense because you are, if they're saying, hey, between PS4 and Switch, how can we grow the brand? Well, people who play PS4 probably already know the brand, and we're going to learn more being on Switch, go on Switch. Xbox, nobody's buying it, right? So I don't think we're going to see that. I think fundamentally, the only thing that Xbox could do right now is it depends how long these generations are going to be, right? So if we get from the first game they drop, which I don't know what their next first party game, maybe it is Call of Duty. I don't remember the release schedules or their dates, but if we get 50% of that roadmap in the next year and a half on Game Pass and everybody else is spending $70 on PlayStation and the generation goes for another 4 years, 5 years, maybe they could kind of actually start to turn that ship around, because I do think it's a very compelling argument to walk into a store or go onto Amazon and go $15 versus $70. But not if they're basically saying we're already conceding the X, we're on to new hardware. I don't know what the timeline is, but fundamentally I think Sony, and that's why people are, what do you think this is? People just, I don't know. It pisses me off because, I guess I can go, well, I can just always have these conversations with Colin because I can't have them. Like when I was talking about the Ubisoft thing, I wasn't knocking PlayStation. I'm not unaware that PlayStation 5 is the number one selling console. All I'm saying is PlayStation is actually in the most precarious situation right now because, in my opinion, because they've built a brand on these games that they know are taking longer and longer and costing more and more. And they are trying to find some wiggle room or some other places they can exploit their talent. And all I was saying is, well, in the meantime, maybe they should bring in some more studios to help fill those slots. Like you were saying with Stellar and Ronin.
Right.
But people just, it's like they don't want to have that conversation. It's like, guys, the Sony of old is dead. And that's not a bad thing. It's everything of old is dead. That's just things advance, The Atari of my childhood is dead. Who gives a shit? Look what we get to play now,
Yeah, fair enough.
But I just I get frustrated because I'm just like, I look at Sony and I say there's so much creative talent there and there's so much great management talent there. But yeah, I mean, they've got to be flopped. If you're paying attention at an executive level at Sony and you're not flop sweating, then you don't know what you're doing. Because they can't just keep pushing out the bangers and getting by with production value. It costs too much. And Helldivers, I think, is a great example, but I don't play Helldivers, but people are saying that Helldivers, is dropping off. But that's all. I want you to think about this. It blows my mind. Helldivers phenomenon when it first came out. People can't stop writing about it, talking about it. Pal World, when it first came out, people can't stop writing, talking about it. Both those games, they're not gone. They're still going to be nice, sustainable business for a while. But people just can't, it used to be, can you make some noise in the service games,
right.
Games of service? Now it's, can you make some noise and stay there?
Yeah.
Look at fucking Multiverses.
Amen.
Multiverses did everything right? They fucked up with content drops, so they pulled it back in for a year. They came back out, and they did everything right. They have daily missions, weekly missions, meta missions above that, unlock this, unlock that, grind that. They crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And as of 2 days ago, at least on Steam, there's less people playing Multiverses than playing Brawlhalla, which is kind of the closest comparison. And it doesn't mean it's going to fail. It's just like, I wouldn't know what the fuck to do if somebody came to me and said, make a hit service game. Because not only could I know how to make it a hit out the gate, but how do you keep it? How do you keep that momentum like a Fortnite has managed to do or a PUBG has managed to do?
Yeah, it's all in the nomenclature too, isn't it? Because it sucks. It's service games now. Games as a service as opposed to online games or multiplayer games or just games you play with friends. I love that you said this because no one else I've heard articulate this except for me and you, which is I was thinking about this with The Last of Us Online specifically when I was like, what if you just released it? And then just maybe it's good for 6 months and then you move on.
Right.
Like why do you have these? You can't get involved. You can't make bets that are going to be like permanent game bets. Like why would you even do that at this point? You have to make some of those bets. You should be playing on some table where it's like, these are the bets we're making that we hope are permanent, like Fortnite, Minecraft, that kind of shit. But you have to be playing at the tables in the casino that are like way lower odds or higher odds and lower stakes. Like, dude, you don't need to release The Last of Us Online and have it be a game for 10 years. Why would you do that? Why do you need to do that? And don't you realize if you continue to construct games like that towards that end, you'll eventually have no reason to even pursue anything anymore because you're already cutting up all of the time that exists instead of circulating through the time with games. And this is the argument that you're making with Game Pass, which is a great argument where I love that you said it, man. It's good to hear someone else articulate that because that bothers the fuck out of me. We used to have multiplayer games where if a game was as big as Helldivers 2 and then went away, that would have been like one of the biggest games ever.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, why
and
can't
it probably
that
didn't cost that fucking much. It's not like a $300 million swing. How much was that game? You know?
No, it probably cost too much to make considering what it actually is, but they lucked out. You know, like it ended up being, because it was in development for so long, but it ended up being huge. Right. And so it doesn't matter. They made all their money back many times over. Why can't that be good enough? I know that's a weird, like, you don't understand capitalism and the markets and growth of publicly traded companies and all this. And I'm like, yes, but why do you have to just make bets to that end? That's why you had to cancel a bunch of your fucking games because they were all trying to become the same thing instead of just filling niches, you know?
And again, it's hard enough. I mean, it's so funny that the summit of Everest is now almost like, well, yeah, there's a new summit, right? I mean, look at Destruction All-Stars, right? They couldn't even be in the same atmosphere to breathe as Helldivers 2. That's how poorly it was received, or Drawn to Death, right? So the idea that you shouldn't be fucking swinging from chandeliers, that you actually got to be a Pal World or a Helldivers 2, because people still haven't cracked that nut. That still feels like lightning in a bottle and luck anyway. And now, you know, so I agree. I think it's I think it's really, that's what I'm saying. I think if you're an executive at Sony, and unless you think you figured it out, and that would be great. But short of that, if you're not flop sweating going, how do we, you know, because we've built this machine based on a number of really expensive things. And I don't know. Again, I'm not gloom. See, this is what bugs me too. I'm just getting so tired of people. Cause they always come at me because all I'm supposed to say is rah, rah, what they like. And I'm like, guys, I'm trying to have a real conversation here. I'm not knocking Sony. I have a PlayStation. I played it last night. Fuck you.
And I'm just saying that either way, they're a company. You know?
Well, oh yeah, about that, sure. But I care about just the lack of, I don't know. I don't know. The discourse has gotten so shit.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And maybe that's an old man thing to say. Maybe if you're 15, you're like, fuck you, bitch. It's great.
Dude,
maybe it is.
I've been tweeting out every day because I'm trying to reach, I was talking about this on Sacred Symbols. I'm trying to reach.
Oh, I saw that you've been more active on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm trying every day to just put a clip out. I've been paying someone to just clip the Sacred Symbols up for me and just give me clips that he thinks are interesting. I'm not even doing it myself. And I'm trying to just get to the 5 million views in 3 months threshold. And then you can then monetize. And I just want to see like what the money looks like. I want to just run an experiment. Because I got my check mark back randomly for some reason. I have no idea. I'm not paying for it. So so I'm like, all right, I'll utilize this. So I've been putting videos out and sometimes I just mute them every time because I don't really want the notifications, but I'll go in and read the responses sometimes. And it's like, dude, people are so angry about everything, like not even related to anything that's being said on the video. Like you'd think the video would be the most inflammatory thing. It's strange. Like there are so many people out there that don't really know how to talk or have conversations, receive information, hear differing opinions on things, and not take it so personally. It's very weird. Like, they're very wrapped up into things. Like, and people, because when people attack PlayStation to me, they think they're attacking me. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I've done really well and I'm in this space and I'll always cover PlayStation, whether it's a legacy brand or a current brand. I don't really care. Like,
can you imagine? I mean, you've got there's enough nostalgia now that you can be doing PlayStation content till you die.
I can make a living doing all retro PlayStation. And that's why I've said in the past, I wanted to buy Podcast Beyond from IGN, the name, to make that into a retro PlayStation podcast. Like, since it's the first PlayStation podcast, it would be cool. And my first PlayStation podcast, it would be cool if like we could do that as a retro spinoff. So I totally agree with you. Like, there's a whole, it's you could say that for Xbox as well. Like, there's a whole legacy of things. So I'm a PlayStation fan. I want it to exist, but I don't really, like, it's not going to ruin my life or anything like that. I'll just figure out a different way.
They have to realize you cheer for the Jets, right? It's like, dude, he doesn't have to be on the winning team. That's not where he's invested.
Right. And I like it's like the academics of it almost. Like, I love the industry. I love everything that surrounds the games. I know you're the same. So I think that what I'm realizing is a lot of audiences on, like, vocal audiences on the internet are just not into that sort of long form what I think is thoughtful in conversation. It reduces instead to like tribal fanboyism that they then try to project on you, like you're the fanboy. Yeah. And I'm like,
well, there's more going. There's a lot more going on under the surface because of social media that I don't think we really understand all of what's driving it. And that's just even if you extract the trolls that are just doing it for entertainment purposes, right? So, and you can't really tell who is what. I will tell you, I'm really kind of pissed at Twitter because of the checkmark thing. So I have a checkmark and I pay for it because I want hey, I'm streaming today, the stream's live, to be as amplified as possible because it brings people in. So it's good for that. And I was making money off of it. Not a lot. I made like $200 in a month, but I don't have as many followers as you do. And then they said, oh, we're taking away your monetization. I'm like, okay, but why? And I tweeted out a screenshot of Baldur's Gate 3 with all the women. I just had a party of women and they were all naked. And I was like, this is so great. I'm going to walk around with them all naked. And it wasn't porn. It was just like, look at this screen. And, and they put up a thing saying, oh, this is against terms of service. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And that has stayed with me. And then I turn on fucking Twitter and there's literally like people fucking each other.
Yeah.
It's just porn central now. And I'm like, but I can't monetize because I had a screen, and none of these companies have any real customer service. It's like, okay, well, look into your complaint.
Yeah, they don't care.
They don't. Yeah. So,
it's the definition of captive.
Yeah. But it's nuts. But I mean, the discourse, the lack of, discourse bothers me, or the anger bothers me, but I get it. I guess it's fun for people.
It's fine. I
should read the room better. I should go, look, if you want to have a smart conversation, or at least an attempt at smart conversation on my part in terms of what I bring to the table, maybe it's smart, maybe it's not, but I try, go talk to Colin or go on a podcast or whatever. Don't, but you're acting, Jaffe, like you're looking for a 4-star Michelin meal, 3-star, whatever the best is. And you're going to McDonald's and you're bitching about it. It's like, yeah, that's probably my fault.
Yeah. Well, I think here's what I've realized about like the kind of content we do and like long form stuff and chaotic shit in some sense and thoughtful, but we're really nerdy and I think incisive is like most people don't want it. Like it's not actually what most people want. Like you just have to find the people out there that do, and survive off of them and thrive in that environment and maybe try to change the conversation at the fringes. But I realize that most of the people that comment on my stuff like in a negative way they're not reachable because we're just in two different lanes. It's not even that one's better than the other. It's just, I have no interest in kind of being in the mud. Doesn't mean that I don't have biases or preferences because I do. Like I obviously do. It's just to say that I don't know how you can listen to these shows and think anything other than that they're intellectually honest conversations.
Yeah, if you actually listen to them, that's the tricky part. But I think the what's cool about it is for every 20 people who is an asshole, there's one person that's like, because I've seen that in my scope of content, which is, all these people hated it or they got mad at me and they didn't even watch it. But one person out of 20 or 30 were like, oh, I followed you because of that video, and now I'm a member or whatever. So I'm sure in your case, most of the comments are inflammatory, but you've probably picked up 5 to 10 fans that just never say anything, but they come watch your long form shit,
Sure.
right? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And I think you're absolutely right. You have to like win. That's like winning hearts and minds, which is like, that's part of the job. And I have no right to access any audience. I have to constantly earn it. There is
13,000 true fans.
What'd you say?
Oh, that was 13,000 true fans.
Yeah, 13,000 true fans. That's enough.
Right. I'm still shooting for the 1,000.
Yeah,
but
it's. I think we're lucky to have many times that really true fans. It's like, which is cool, and you do too.
What a true fan, according to that theory, though, from Wired, is somebody who will spend $1,000 a year,
right,
on your shit. So
it's it's great, man. Like it all evens out. I've kind of come to peace with that. And actually, most of the comments aren't even negative. It's on certain videos, they're overwhelmingly negative, but I know what I'm getting myself into when I tweet about Xbox or I tweet about things that people don't want me to talk about. But the ironic thing is that and we said it earlier, as PlayStation becomes more and more dominated by Xbox as a publisher on their platform, they're going to come up more and more, like Xbox is a very relevant brand to PlayStation now. Like people are going to have to kind of get comfortable with those conversations happening. If they're uncomfortable with those conversations happening, I guess that's kind of too bad. They can skip ahead or not listen to those topics.
The funniest part though is just how it reminds me of comic books, right? The people, I still, kids know Marvel because of the movies and because of the theme parks and stuff, but and kids read comics with manga and stuff like that. The manga section at fucking Barnes and Noble is just overflowing. But kids aren't reading comic books like, every Tuesday, Wednesday comics come out from Marvel, like anywhere close to what they were. And I think similarly with games, I mean, it really is funny to me how younger generations are not, we don't really see the kind of excitement of the SNES kid at Christmas, when he realized they had bought it, or it was N64 or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, the N64 kid, yeah.
That they're now Minecraft and Roblox and Discord and, and so it's just interesting too, because when you say we're going to see more and more Xbox in the PlayStation ecosystem, we're getting into a generation of younger people that don't even give a shit. They're just kind of like, I'm playing what's cool that my friends like, and I can play it anywhere. There's no, what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. It's the whole,
and
I was just
ownership is like, my kids have never, the last time they owned a game was like Dora the Explorer Find and Hunt that we bought from the Apple store. Other than that, it's like, it's just stuff they download.
It's funny, man. You say that, like I had Father's Day party at my house yesterday and people were in the pool and we were barbecuing and hanging out and my nephews were here. And my youngest nephew, Dash, is going into 8th grade. Oh no, 7th. He's going into 7th grade. And
is he fast? Please tell me he's fast.
He isn't fast. I mean, he's probably just a very average. His full name is Dashel, but we call him Dash.
Okay.
He's a huge nerd. I love him like to death. I love all my nephews, but he's like he and I connect at a very deep level with the nerdy shit. And he plays Warhammer and like he's very funny. And he's a huge PlayStation nerd and all that kind of stuff. And he loves G.I. Joe and he loves coming up and looking at my toys.
Of course.
And he was saying, we were in here yesterday, like shooting the shit. And I was like, so what do you think? And he's like, it's crazy, man. Like none of my friends care about anything. Like they don't have a toy they collect or a brand they're really into or whatever. And he's like, it's so, I'm like, I feel bad for you, kid. Cause I feel like you can't go into the toy store. There's no toy stores anymore. You can't go into like Target and go to the toy section and really like just, I remember there being choices and things that would like, I'd be interested and I'd buy like one toy. I'd buy the Terminator 2 toy. Just to see or whatever. And like, if I'm going to start collecting that or Starship Troopers back in the day or something like that. And I don't know, man, it's just a totally different vibe now where it's just an amalgamation of shit. It's just
everything is made off existing IP, which I get because it's expensive. But here's what I mean, I don't know about Dash, but I can tell you probably he's got a number of cohorts that if you walked in and said, again, I'm out of it. But if it was like, here's Markiplier or Logan Paul merch or merch from Danny Gonzalez or something, those are their heroes. I mean, literally. I know it sounds kind of like a media talking point that the stars of today are, for kids or the YouTube, but I see it. I mean, they'd rather sit and watch YouTube instead of put on a Netflix show or go to the movies. They'd rather just sit here and, go through reels or stories or wherever the fuck they are on Instagram, which I think is cool. I don't lament. I love that it's, they're going to have their own nostalgia, but you're right about the toys and stuff. I mean, in the brands, because they're all based on our fucking brands.
Right.
Make some new shit. I got to show you this. Hang on.
Yeah, good. For the audio listener, Jaffe just got up to go to his bookshelf.
This is, when you're talking about buying a Terminator toy. So this is a book. I don't know if I've shown you this already, called Rack Toys.
No, I don't think you have shown me this.
It's basically, Rack Toys are these things that were in like the 5 and dimes and the drugstores and stuff. So they were like the real cheapy toys, but companies would get the licenses to like the Hulk, and for some reason they'd put the Hulk on a motorcycle, and it's like, okay, Hulk,
that's sick.
Yeah. And so it's a whole book about, when that, and this still exists, but it doesn't exist, like it used to. But that's where a lot of times I would discover a brand. It would just be like, what the fuck is, like Thor, I mean, come on. No, but now because of Chris Hemsworth in the movies, back in the day, Thor was like a C-level character, but you knew about him because it's like, oh, look, they made a Thor flashlight. Dude, Mom said if I go to the doctor and get a shot, I can get a toy at the drugstore. Right. Okay, I guess I'll get Thor.
Dude, I love the toy books.
I do too. I
have a bunch of the G.I. Joe books, but I've seen many of the other brands books and I'm also friends with a guy, Kenny, that listens to the show, actually, who owns a toy store in Ohio, who's kind of like my liaison to that world, which is kind of cool. He helps me.
Is it like an old school toy store, or is it a franchise?
No, it's I think it's an old school toy store. I don't know if he wants me to say the name of it. I'll tell you because I don't know why he would.
How would he not want you to say the name of it?
Yeah, it's toy. It's the. Let me look it up here because I want to make sure I got it right. The name right. Yeah, that's what I thought. I was going to call it Toy Department. The Toy Department. It's called. It's in Fairfield, Ohio. And he's like he
clearly suffers from a lack of creativity. But that said, though, I'm going to go to his website.
Yeah, go to his website. He's great. He's been.
What should we name the toy store? I don't know. How about the toy store? It's pretty good. I'll go with that.
Yeah, his name's Kenny Kopnick. He's a really great guy. I've been trading with him and buying and selling, I guess, in some sense with him since 2019 or so. When I was leaving Santa Monica to come to Virginia, I sold a bunch of my swag, basically.
Fuck. That's a hell of a toy store. Have you been to his website?
Yeah, I know. He's like a pretty big deal in that like toy dealer.
Go to the man's site. God damn. This reminds me, there used to be a shop in Santa Monica called Puzzle Zoo, and it still might be there on the promenade, but it got really small. Mm-hmm. But they used to have exactly this. All of the statues, all the old toys, I mean, look at this. They've got things that are like, like a figure from fucking Jonah Hex with the guy who played Thanos. So that was a bomb of a movie. There's a toy on the shelf for him. I mean, that's cool. It's a good store. It's a good store.
Yeah, it's cool. Anyway, I mean, he's great. He sent me, I got a bunch of boxed like mint, 89, 90, 91 G.I. Joes from him.
Nice.
More recently, I traded him a bunch of, I think I must have told you this. I said it on the show. Like, so another friend of mine that I met through the show, who's a builder in the Virginia area, who does a bunch of work for me and my family, and he owns like a big builder in the area. He flips houses, and one day he like gets in touch with me, and he's like, "This guy's house." So this guy basically passed away. We acquired his house, and it's full of video games. And
I think you did, but what happened to the games?
So I got all of them. They weren't like there was like probably a few boxes of cartridge stuff. Actually, I have a really mint version of Zelda over here that I got from him.
NES Zelda?
Yeah. But most of it was like PS2 and beyond, GameCube,
right?
Xbox, original Xbox.
A bunch of Army Men games.
Right. Like a lot, but it was like a shit ton of just that stuff, boxes and boxes. It cost me, I think, $1,000 almost to ship all of it to him. I cleaned it all up.
Why did he have all that? Was he just a player that played games?
He was like he apparently owned a store, and then the store went out of business at some point, and he just ingested all these games.
Yep.
So I went through them all and I cataloged them for my friend, and then I ended up trading them to him for future considerations, basically. And then those considerations ended up being a bunch of boxed GI Joes, which is awesome. But yeah, the reason this is a little insight into my world, I guess, too. And I don't know if you relate to this in any way. You probably don't, because you don't really give a shit about what people think about different things. But I try not to associate myself with friends and their businesses if they don't necessarily want that, because I don't have a great reputation in some corners for whatever, unearned reasons. So I don't want it to be like, Colin's friends with Kenny from the toy department and all that kind of.
Kenny, I love your store. Call me. Yeah. No,
I can put you guys in touch for sure. He would hook you up with whatever you wanted, probably any sort of connection. My biggest challenge when it comes to reputation is like, I genuinely want sponsors for my shows. But I want sponsors that want to sponsor me. Like, I would like, pot dispensaries. I would like cool toy stores. I would like, adult sex shop. Like cause I don't want somebody who's like, you talk vulgar, Jaffe. I'm like, yeah, fuck you. I want the sponsors that vibe with that shit, and it's really hard to find sponsors that are willing to sort of go, yeah, we sell retro games. Not a problem, Jaffe. We'll put your shit on our, So I get it. I think your reputation probably is better than mine, but there are still people out there that are, it's like why I don't want my neighbors to know who I am. Not that I'm like a celebrity or a big deal or anything.
Did they ever ask you who you are? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, well, it doesn't really come up. I have friendly relations with them, but like, it's just, very cursory. How's it going?
Right.
Good to see you kind of stuff. So we don't really get into it. The only people that really know are, there's a couple that lives across the street from us. And they know who I am, because they're like younger. They're actually younger than us. And we have we've had beers with them a few times and stuff. But I don't want them to know, because I don't want to like them to look me up and then have this this Google image of me. You remember? I'll talk about this. You remember when you did a video a while ago?
I remember this.
And it actually, I think, is how we started talking deeply again.
I said Colin Moriarty is not a racist was the name of the video, right?
And I reached out because I was like, someone in my life was like, do you know that this like comes up like amongst all the other fucking shit that comes up about you? And I was like, oh, and so I reached out to Jaffe and I'm like, can you just rename that video something else so it stops coming up? Because I appreciate the sentiment. But like,
I changed it to like Colin Moriarty gives really bad blowjobs, I think is what it says now.
Right. Yeah. Which is fine. That's good. I want people to think that, because I actually give great blowjobs.
I don't remember but of course I got it, because when you Google my name, sometimes still misogynist sexist comes up because of an article in Kotaku that Stephen Totillo, who I've made amends with, but he wouldn't change even after I talked to the reporter. And I said, okay, you can say I made a sexist statement because I did, and I didn't realize it, but I apologize for it, and that's fine. But she didn't even know what the term misogyny meant when I'm like, but you're calling me a misogynist. And Totillo's like, yeah, I can't change that. And she didn't even work there anymore. And I'm like, dude.
Yeah.
They don't care. I get it.
I mean,
they don't care.
Defamation's part of the game. I totally get it. Like that's what got Joe Rogan's attention the first time I was on Rogan was the article about me being racist from Business International or whatever. And they wrote like, Colin Moriarty fired after a racist joke. And I'm like, first of all, I wasn't fired, and it wasn't a racist joke. It was a racist joke.
That's right.
It was a misogynistic joke, but it wasn't.
I don't know. It was misogynistic.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's misogynistic in that it's like, it's a joke. It's supposed to be offensive in some sense. It's supposed to tickle something inside of you and you're supposed to have the human reaction as a fucking normal person to be like, oh, he's kidding.
Right.
But that obviously didn't happen.
There's that IGN article that's going around again about the Black Myth Wukong guys.
Right.
And
what's the story with that? Is there anything there?
Oh my, well, who knows? Because no one's actually reporting on it. So my guess is no. The story is that there was a social media post in China is the only evidence of this occurring, right? So it's been translated. My guess is even if there was a monetary figure, it's wrong because in the translation, because the story is Sweet Baby Inc. reached out and said, we charge $7 million for our services, which is not true.
That's outrageous amount of money.
Right. It's like, what do you, they don't charge them. They probably charge $130,000 if they do an entire project. No one's making $7 million.
Yeah, that's an outrageous sum.
But so maybe it was more like, what is the currency in China called?
Yuan.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know what that is, but anyway, so it's like, okay. And the guys at the developer said, yeah, no, we're not interested. And then apparently because of that, Sweet Baby Inc. was pissed and they went out to the press and said, we want you to write bad articles about these guys. So IGN then went out and apparently slammed them. And okay, so is there a sexist culture at that developer? Probably. The stuff that the leader was quoted on feels very much like 2005, 2020 David Jaffe press, right? Or maybe 2012 David Jaffe press, where I didn't, we hadn't had, I didn't, better, you do better. I'd say vulgar shit all the time. And I thought it was funny. And sometimes I'd walk it back because I realized, oh shit, that was a really offensive thing. I'm sorry. I was just being a stupid, douchebag because it's funny. That's the kind of stuff that was that this guy had been saying. But now it's become this story where people, whatever you think of DEI, ESG, Sweet Baby, all that, they are convinced that this has happened, which is Sweet Baby said, we'll charge you $7 million for us. And they said, no, thank you. And then Sweet Baby went to all the press and said, write bad things. And the press kowtowed and said, you got it, Sweet Baby Inc. And I'm like, guys, this is the scenario you've painted. Unless you have any evidence, and they don't, I'm like, where, show me the receipt, show me the email chain, show me the reporting from someone who's not a translated, just random guy on Chinese social media. But it's the story now. That's occurred.
Yeah, it's weird.
In their world.
I believe that IGN reporter, I know her name, because I see it every so often. She seems to write from a social justice perspective, which is which is fine if that's what you want to do, but that's going to court skepticism about many of your claims. And that little bit of truth or whatever in that situation gives rise to these incredible conspiracies that require.
Yeah, but I mean, can you fathom a world in which IGN got a call from a consultancy or any firm, but certainly a consultancy firm like Sweet Baby, and they said, these guys pissed us off, go write a mean article about them? I mean, is that a thing that occurs in maybe there are isolated cases, but
no, it doesn't. It just doesn't really compute. I didn't believe it. I didn't look into it any deeper because I saw the headline as $7 million and I'm like, that's completely
there's nothing
outrageous
to look into. You can't find any evidence of any of this.
So I didn't even read into what people were claiming, because I was like, there's no way Sweet Baby Inc. thought they were getting $7 million out of anyone.
I know.
I don't think people understand how video games are made if you think that they're throwing around $7 million for that service.
Yeah.
That $7 million can go into fucking assets in Singapore or something like that. And
Shuhei Yoshida doesn't make $7 million. Herman Hulst might make it with bonuses, but he ain't making it as a salary. No. Nobody's making $7 million.
It's outrageous. So that put me off. I just think that there's interesting smoke in certain places, not even in this conversation, but just generally, absolutely. But it's just the wrong people. It's the wrong people chasing.
Yeah.
We need some honest, interesting people, very similar to what I felt like happened with the Twitter files, where there were just random journalists that kind of came in and all covered this thing and tried to do it objectively and from different perspectives.
Who was the main guy? What was his name? He used to write for Rolling Stone.
Yeah, Matt Taibbi.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I would I put it past big companies to be scum of the earth? Fuck no. But you can't just make the claim and assume it's truth. What are you talking about? I mean, you can, but you're an idiot.
I agree.
So,
well,
I don't know.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but let's.
Okay. So talk about whatever you want. If we want to wrap it up, we can do that. I got till about 2:15.
Okay. No. Yeah. We'll be done before then. I wanted to do kind of a postscript on. So we agree that the Xbox conference was really strong.
As a conference standing on its own. We don't know if it will translate into great games.
Right. We'll reflect on that later when the time comes, I guess. And we both agree, Game Pass is a tantalizing value for people. Call of Duty, I think, will be hugely important to really helping make or break the concept of Game Pass. I think if Call of Duty really sticks, I think it can really be meaningful. But I think that if nothing really moves, or it moves only in a small way, I think that there's nothing else that's going to help it grow into the way it needs to grow.
The thing I think you should watch for, or I'm going to be watching for, is certainly the first one. If Call of Duty comes out on Game Pass and PlayStation and it barely ticks the subscriber number, that's really bad. But almost worse is if it comes out, it does big on subscription numbers, and then 3 months later, everybody churns out because first party Xbox cannot deliver something to keep subscribing for after that main bulk of people have gotten bored and they've moved on. That's the real test, I think.
Right. But and then the bean counters will be analyzing that very closely. So we agree on all of that. I think that things like Microsoft and Xbox couldn't have done much more than they just did. And I think that they're well on their way to becoming a completely dominant multi-platform publisher with a more niche hardware ecosystem, probably beginning with their next console or whatever.
If they can deliver, but I don't even give them 50-50 chance given their past.
Fair enough. So what I wanted to ask you based on that was, you had said, PlayStation seems to be find itself in actually a precarious situation now. And there's an interesting thought about that. And it's what I said earlier, which is Microsoft might have accidentally found its way to the inevitable conclusion quicker, right? Just by failing on the market in some sense compared to its competitor, which will in the long term actually benefit it because it will have been there already and we'll have to make fewer concessions in the future. That is an interesting thought. Does Sony how does Sony have to respond? People are now saying like Sony really owes in some way its user base a response. And it's not even a tit for tat thing. It just needs to say something at some point about its games.
Here's what I think.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I think Sony, and maybe they've had this, but I think the world that Sony came up in and dominated and currently dominates is so radically shifted and shifting that I think unless they've already had a come to Jesus moment of like, let's drill down to what makes PlayStation. If you strip everything away and what is our North Star, what do we do better than anyone else? That I think is really their only hope, because the problem is the generation coming up, like your nephew was saying, doesn't really care. And they care about things that are not tied to the PlayStation ecosystem or any ecosystem. They just care about, what's online and all that shit. The games are getting more and more expensive. It's eventually 5 years, 10 years going to be streaming anyway. So it's not going to be about the hardware. It's going to be about the software only. But let's say put that out there. That's not really relevant. I personally don't think making console boxes and big expensive AAA games, I don't see that as a path. Like, I don't think you can just keep building on that unless you just want to stay boutiquey and small. But you can't continue to rule the roost, because people always talked about Game Pass being sustainable. I don't think that business model is sustainable. But so what I think is, I did offer up the suggestion of buy Ubisoft. I don't know if they can get the money. They almost bought Paramount, right? So they can get the money.
Yeah, they have more cash on hand, and they have leverage. They have
ways to get it.
It's not a great time to do that, but
I mean, fundamentally, if what they want to do is placate the fans, because the fans looked at the Xbox show and they think, like, if Sony put on that Xbox show, you could almost guarantee, because of their pedigree and their experience and their talent, that almost every one of those games they showed would genuinely deliver. You may not love it. It may be Horizon for me, but it would still be unquestionably a really good product. They want that. And the only way they're going to get that is for Sony to grow their studios and say, look, we're going to try to make as many Helldivers and ultimately Fortnites as we can. Like you said, put some bets on those tables. But we absolutely have to make sure, if we want to please these particular people that you're talking about that came out mad after the Xbox showcase, we need more studios, so we're not having to have this lineup of decent enough but not brilliant second party games, and that we can put out bangers 4 to 6 times a year. And they don't have the ability to do that, not because they're not talented. They just don't have enough people, right? Xbox is playing in the, hey baby, but oh, you look like a fucking rock star. Good for you, man. I don't care. I'm glad you're here. But I'm on a podcast right now, so you can shut my door if you want. I think that, Microsoft is, as I've said, and everybody said this is not Jaffe wisdom. This is just me parroting shit. But Microsoft is now, when it comes to entertainment, in the realm of Apple and in the realm of Amazon and in the realm of Tencent. And that's the playing field. It has increased. It has gotten bigger. It has gotten more expensive. And it doesn't mean Sony can't compete there, but you can't compete when Ghost of Tsushima 2 is taking forever. And where's Corey's new game? And what are they doing with God of War? And what are they doing with Naughty Dog? And, you gotta get more shit made.
Yeah, it's right? time for everyone to go. That's kind of the thing. It's about time for everyone to go again.
In terms of showing stuff.
Yeah, well, in terms of releasing stuff. I mean, that's why I think people are concerned with them having not shown anything, and the amount of time, a little bit of mismanagement. Like the Last of Us Online was just a really bad example of. And we made fun of it. Remember on the show, I was like, "You made this game for years," and then you're like, "But guys, I just thought of this problem."
Yeah,
And
more importantly, where the fuck is Marathon? If they're the guys that put the skewer to Last of Us Online because they know, could we fucking see Marathon? I get Destiny Last Shape. People love. They say it's a great swan song for that. So maybe everything was focused on that. But it is a little weird we didn't see anything from Marathon.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. Like I think you're totally right that, and it is a new way of a different way of looking at things, that everyone ends up in the same place. Ultimately, it's a matter of like how and when. What Sony needs to lean into, I think, as a company, is that they actually have major advantages over their competitors because they're already, and I think they've already begun to embrace it and really have fully embraced it, even with the dual CEO mandate of letting someone just focus on the content and letting the other person focus on the hardware and the services, and just removing that from the table. I think Sony was a very smart company in the 70s and 80s getting involved in music and movies, and they did it through acquisitions. That's why you're saying with Ubisoft, it's like, would you just expand to kind of get these IP, these assets, these studios, and have them just work on
studios? Like, I get that Far Cry is not going to win you a game of the year, but you know what? One of your 5-6 exclusives for PlayStation 6 is a new Far Cry, and one of them is using the Avatar engine that game looks spectacular. Their tech and their ability to deliver is not a problem. Short of Sea of Thieves, or not Sea of Thieves, what's it called? Skull and Bones. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Interrupt, but it's just, and people are like, no, they should buy From Software. I'm like, no, I'd love that.
I don't think they're even for sale,
I know, but I'm saying that what people aren't getting is, I'm not saying, of course, From Software makes better games than Ubisoft. Of course, Capcom would be a better development house to own than Ubisoft. That's not the point. The point is scope, scale. You cannot compete with only 4 games.
What I was going to say, Jaffe, though, and I'm curious what you think of this, is there's like they took the agnostic approach by buying movie studios and buying music, basically back catalogs and production capabilities and stuff to become one of the big movie houses and one of the only remaining big record labels. And so they
still don't have any original movies that people give a shit about. That's the funniest part about it, though.
Truly. I agree.
They don't have an E.T. They don't have a Top Gun. They don't have anything. Maybe that's how I hope they buy Paramount, because they can't make it on their own.
Yeah, it seems like they might be back in play with them. I don't really know what the right move is there. But I think so I guess what I'm saying is Sony has this major advantage, I think, in that they already embraced being an entertainment company a long time ago and have slowly morphed into one, where electronics are a minor part of what they do now compared to everything else that they do. It's not irrelevant. They're deeply involved in electronics and make some of the best electronics in the world, and that's widely known. But I think that they're kind of already where they need to be in those spaces, so they need to learn from those places, which is where I think PlayStation Productions comes in. They are pursuing new films. Uncharted 2's film or the
I
second
saw
Uncharted
that
film
today.
has been greenlit, I guess, and is in production.
And Until Dawn.
Until Dawn as well, right? And and a bunch of other things as well. I think the problem I think with PlayStation is it's really risky to fuck with it too deeply because it's such a dominant part of Sony now. Sony is completely reliant on it. Like without PlayStation, Sony would be in a lot of trouble as a corporation, which was not the case when PlayStation launched, and nowhere near. It was in the numbers that Herman Hulst shared in his presentation, where it's like we have already made $10 billion in net income this generation. We made $1 billion in the entire PS1 generation and $2 billion in the entire PS2 generation. That's like how huge we are now. And so I think that they're afraid of fucking with it too much, which is why I think they've shown a little bit of restraint in the M&A market, although the M&A market is not palatable anymore because of loans. They would have to do it in cash, and they could do those deals if they wanted to. But I think there's something to this idea of them embracing what they already know and have learned over decades in entertainment. And cross media is going to be a huge part of PlayStation's future.
How does that look as it relates to PlayStation embracing what they've known? What do you mean? What would they have to do that?
Well, I think that's what I was going to say was like cross media, I think is going to be a huge part of that, of circulating things between so like Uncharted going from Sony Pictures to a Sony video game to whatever, back to a game and back to a movie. This is like the rhythm that they had developed for many years. Sony's, first of all, a notorious purchaser of back catalogs, and people can read about that. Yeah. They buy a ton of music back catalogs, and then they feed that music out, but also back into their own projects in which they don't have to license things and all of that. And there's this real circuitous relationship with everyone between the music and the film branch, and they're trying to get the game.
Does that vision ever? Like, I remember when it was Olaf Olafsson who ran Sony back when I was at ImageSoft, and his whole word, he introduced it into the zeitgeist of Hollywood, was like, or maybe it was Mickey Shuloff, but it was synergy. We want this to work, but fundamentally we see that with Disney. It doesn't, Star Wars Acolyte is not more successful because there's a great theme area at Disneyland. And there's some great Star Wars video games coming, we think, but it's not going to make Rise of Skywalker any more or less successful. I wonder about that brass ring or gold ring or whatever actually being worth chasing. Like, what is it? If Uncharted 2 is just as good as Uncharted 1, which is like, it's fine. It made some money. Who gives a shit?
I just think it's a way to get, I guess the argument I'm making is that not only do these companies have interesting circuitous relationships with each other, but they also give you multiple bites at the apple that video games have never had. If you invest in from a brand standpoint, right, and you can, and what I'm saying is you can kick these brands in almost perpetuity between your outfits for as long as you possibly can to extract as much. Everyone's tired of the Horizon games. Okay, we'll start developing a Horizon TV show. All right, we had the Horizon TV show as a success for 4 seasons. Everyone's got a little bit of nostalgia for Horizon. Let's bring Horizon back.
Isn't that maybe the reason that Dash comes into your office and says nobody gives a shit about anything my generation, because everything is based on something that's 20, 30 years old, and the new stuff and the chance taking is happening on YouTube for people.
That's true, but you've made the argument that it's too expensive to get the results that they can, and so they have to figure out ways to extract. In my opinion,
but
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, but the argument that it's too expensive, this is the problem, is that they are, and this is one of the fundamental problems with PlayStation as it scales, is if you build your foundation on production value, right, you're always going to be heading closer and closer and closer to a situation where there's too many cooks in the kitchen and there's too much money being spent, and you can't actually have that balance between art and commerce. And ultimately you end up with a generation of kids that don't really respond to this shit because it's just like, it's old to them, or it just feels not genuine. And if you look at everything from rock and roll to punk rock to movies to the original PlayStation, younger people especially, they respond to things that speak to them and that feel genuine and that they connect with. And that's how you do build that love of a brand. But how are you going to do that if it just feels like corporate, pablum all the time? So, I mean, I'm not saying there's synergy's not of value, but I'm saying that if you are talking about how do you make PlayStation work going forward? I think if you keep building everything on the bones of production value and cost, and you no longer are really about, dude, that's fucking cool. That's a cool idea. That's neat. I want to play that. I want to do that. And it's just like, oh, we have Uncharted. Let's make a movie. Now, it'll work, but it's not going to be the seismic shit that is going to please those fans you were talking about that came out of the Xbox conference and said, where's our shit? That's what I think. I think they've lost. I really do. I think they have lost the threat. At least maybe not internally. Maybe internally Scott Rohde's got it down. Maybe internally Herman and Chu have it down. We just haven't been privy to what they're going to do. But if you're just basing it on the output, they seem kind of like this massive, it's kind of like when the guerrilla warfare of the American Revolution caught the British totally surprised. Like they seem like this massive warship out in the ocean that is being attacked by these little gnats and shit. And it's like, we can't turn fast enough. Like that's how I feel when I think about Sony. It doesn't mean I don't love PlayStation. I'm not knocking them, but it just like, where's the sex? Where's the juice? Where's the vision? Where's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Where's the,
I agree. You make a good point that making games is so dangerous because you have to make right calls early and you need to be where you're supposed to be on the map and
your younger audience is telling you, we don't need your production value. We'll fucking play Roblox, motherfuckers.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I think this is unfortunate for Sony because that's their major advantage is the production value.
That's why they need a new North Star.
Yeah, you're right. And so what would you do? I mean, part of me feels like the one advantage they might have intrinsically in the PlayStation brand is that they're in this position they're in now, but they're essentially sales aligned with their previous console, which is not ideal. You want to be outselling your previous console, but that's not bad. And
no, they're doing great right now.
Yeah, and that's what I keep telling people, and it sounds fanboyish, and I don't mean it to, but it's like, if you're making the argument that they're in danger, they're not doing as well as they could be, then you have to understand that they're doing it with one arm tied behind their back because they're not releasing games and they're still doing this. So what you're basically suggesting is that if they just get the games down, then it's really going to hit. And I keep making the argument to the audience that I think that gaming is so varied now and so inclusive of many different experiences that it might not even really matter. Like, it seems like there's a level of entropy we're getting towards where it becomes more chaotic and you can't predict future outcomes, and they are in a bind, which is why, again, what I was saying earlier, there might be an argument that Xbox getting to that space first is actually an advantage.
The thing that one of the best lessons I ever got, I know I've talked about this, but again, if you're listening to this and you want to hear it, expressed well and not just from, me, go look up Iwata's GDC talk where he was talking about when Nintendo was fucked after GameCube. And, he the best example, he was the Pepsi Coke fight. He says, and we had to realize we can't be in that fight. We have to go make, and he said the solve was bottled water. That became the number one selling thing. And nobody would have predicted bottled fucking water would outsell Coke or Pepsi.
Brilliant.
And so they said, that's what we did at Nintendo. We said, we can't fight in these bloody waters of the ocean. We have to go find blue seas. And that's what we did with our stuff. And that's what they're still doing in a lot of ways. But I think Sony is so filled with creative people that I'm not saying get out of the big budget game business, but I am saying you guys need to be investing, and maybe they are, we don't know everything they're doing, but they need to be investing in farm league stuff. They need to be going, you know what? We are going to put out the weird low budget shit that we did in the PS3 days. The only difference should be that it's going to be with an eye towards commercial products, because Fat Princess isn't going to get it done. Flower, which is one of my favorite games of all time, isn't going to get it done. But if you want to, start creating new characters and brands and mechanics that take some chances that could grow into the next big fucking thing, go get the next Neil Druckmann and say, make a 3-hour fucking single player war game set in Afghanistan and just fucking blow people's minds. I mean, that's what PlayStation could do better than anyone else, and then that could become the next Call of Duty or the next Last of Us. But you gotta be baking that shit at some point. And you got to be willing to bake it at a cost that doesn't terrify everybody of losing their jobs if it doesn't hit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they need to, you're right. Cost is prohibitive, risk taking. Cause like you said, Flow and Flower, but Flow and Flower also led to Journey, which ended up being one of the biggest games they ever did,
right.
And so you need to and the Unfinished Swan and all the stuff they invested in that ended up being pretty wise.
Unfinished Swan ended up giving us Edith Finch, which even though I know wasn't a massive sale, still one of the best games ever made. And I'm sure Annapurna's glad they got it.
Totally. And I'll never forget that they announced that game without permission. It's like one of the greatest things ever. And Sony got mega.
I don't remember.
They put up like a blog post. It was just called Edith Finch at the time or whatever. And anyway, people.
But I mean, that's the thing. Where do these new, that's the sexy part. That's the fun part is that, it's not that I don't want the big budget stuff, but I want some new fucking shit. Remember when Star Wars Phantom Menace comes out in 99? And even though, yes, it made a shit ton of money, The Matrix fucking ate its lunch and nobody saw it coming. It came out a few months before and it's like, what the fuck's The Matrix? It's like that was, a touchstone film for a generation of people.
I loved it. I immediately went home to my computer in my room and made The Matrix.
And tried to see
I did the Matrix screensaver,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, but where is that? And again, but I think the important part is you still have to have your commercial hat on. And Sony in the past has always done all of this low budget indie stuff, and they've allowed it to be, who did you have on your show recently? Good interview. Jonathan Blow stuff. Jonathan Blow is great, but The Witness is not going to get it done. And Braid is not going to get it done. You need somebody with his mind or his willingness to break some dishes, but they still want to break some dishes within something that can actually move units beyond, the arty farty class.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be interested to see. I think Sony has really gotten scared of talking, and I get it. They don't want to say anything.
They need to talk. They don't need to say anything. Look what they're selling.
Yeah, it's true. But I think that there is, listen, dude, I can only beat the drum so many times that I think that there are just way too many games and that I don't really give a shit what comes out anymore, because you could just stop releasing games and I'll be perfectly content for years upon years. And I really believe that. Like, there's nothing coming out that I couldn't do without. And I'm glad to play those games as they come out. But what I think is going to end up happening is that they will say something obviously later in the year and have some things to show. And my theory is that they have two teams internally that they've not announced yet that have been incubating: the team that's making the Uncharted game, which I think is fairly obviously in development, and the team that's
but is that the San Diego team that keeps continually getting it shuffled off to somebody else?
Yeah, it's unclear like who it is, but clearly the other one is the Jason Blundell team that's internal too.
Right,
and that's clearly a team that's not been named.
And then I guess Corey's doing something. I mean, I know I honestly don't know what's going on with that. I haven't talked to Corey in a very long time, and I wouldn't expect him to tell me regardless. But I assume that he's doing something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they have probably a God of War sequel or a third game further out, and then something newer, maybe closer. Yeah. And then Naughty Dog, I think, has a couple games going that are single player games, including The Last of Us Part 3 and probably a new game.
But that may be PS6.
Yeah, it would be a real shame if they basically missed the entire generation because of The Last of Us Online. Yeah. But
yeah.
But we'll see, dude. I mean,
there was a what did you think of the Insomniac leaks that came out with Wolverine and Spider-Man 3?
The ones from months ago, or the new details?
No. Well, it's all from the same hack, but they're dripping. I
haven't seen any of the newest stuff. No.
Yeah, there was some Wolverine stuff, and there was some Spidey 3 stuff.
I'll have to go to the games leak Reddit. That's where I usually go.
Oh, it's I just go to NeoGAF and somebody.
Oh, NeoGAF, yeah, that's a good place to go too.
Yeah. But I mean, what's real interesting about it to me is, and I will toot my own horn because it feels good. And nobody else will toot it unless I pay them. But, I made a video a couple years back and I enjoyed Spider-Man 2 a great deal. I thought it was fun. But I was just like, this is getting stale. And boy, everybody came after me with pitchforks. It's like, and now you see these games, and I'm a big fan of the director of Miles Morales, who's directing Wolverine. I think it's going to be great. But what was leaked, and obviously it's early, both for Spider-Man and for Wolverine, it does very much continue to be that it feels very more the same formula. And it's been interesting to see the internet discourse. And again, it sucks to judge things that have leaked because it's not done yet. There could be 1,000 fucking things. But everything that we've seen so far does feel just like really nice, beautiful coat of paint, probably some great storytelling, but it's kind of the same formula. It kind of feels like we're back in the days of the side scroller beat 'em up.
Sure.
Like every licensed property would just get that template and go, okay, cliffhanger, last action hero, Star Wars, all side scroll beat 'em up, go. I don't think it's good if the games don't deliver, but I do think it's good that customers are starting to go, okay, maybe we want something new. We want some, there's this desire for freshness, That's what I think.
Yeah. I wonder, I would love to be a fly on the wall to know what their plans are. If they're looking to revive anything, sign new teams, M&A conversations. I'm very wary. I've always, you know me well enough to know I've always been wary of expansion. I think it's dangerous. I think it hasn't necessarily worked. I think actually over expanding forced Xbox into the position it's in now. Because it's hard to
they were never going to be able to get out of the other position.
That's
because they couldn't produce their way out of it.
Yeah, and again, it's serendipitous. It's not serendipitous. I mean, it was strategy. They ended up in a place where they might want to ultimately be anyway. But I just I get worried about too many cooks in the kitchen and the amount of bureaucracy that would need to be created to manage many more teams than they have. Yeah,
I mean, I get it. But it's if anybody can do it in this industry, it's Sony. Certainly. That's why I have very little faith at Microsoft. I mean, they could surprise the fuck out of me, and not that they give a shit or even know who I am, but I would give them a very well-deserved apology. But there's no reason to think Phil Spencer and Matt Booty are the guys to get it done when it comes to that group of development dropping at a quality and a cadence that gamers want. But I think Sony could. Or maybe they could be a third. I know they're making billions. I'm just saying that good and goddamn well if Sony says they're going to put out 2 to 4 games first party a year, they can do it within 90% accuracy and they'll be good. And that's not nothing. That's pretty fucking rare.
Yeah. With 20 teams, they should basically be in that cadence. Or that's what I'm saying. Like they really shouldn't need much more to be a quarterly family. Like every quarter we have a game.
Do you think that there were just so many service games in development that when those went away, it really like they can recover in a year and then we will be seeing that from them?
I think that the games as a service that they probably canceled were in some ways deeply disruptive to the pipeline of what they expected to deliver. Remember, Jim Ryan was saying when they would split things up by percentage, like we want this many mobile games, we want this many PC games. Like none of this shit has 12. Come out,
right.
So they still have that mobile team that Neon Koi now they're called, that they're going to make a game over there. And I like that they're exploring these different platforms. That's why people were so aghast by the Switch thing. I'm like, I think it's kind of interesting. I'm curious to see how Lego does over there. Why not? So I think they have to embrace some different ideas.
If nothing else, they make a shit ton of money and they invest that in a new IP. Isn't that what you want?
Right. I think it's what I was saying earlier about like multiple bites at the apple and almost subsidizing the needs of new development with other games. But on the other hand, Jaffe, there's no surprise that fucking Spider-Man 2 or 3 looks just like Spider-Man 2 because they're like, we spent so much goddamn money on this stupid game that we need to extract more money out of at least one more go and another piece of DLC.
Well, like 2 more goes. It's part 1 and part 2.
Oh, right. Oh, so they did decide to do that?
Oh, I don't know where it is. Okay,
because I thought that their internal research, I think their metrics were like, that will cost us more and we'll make less if we split it.
And they said we're spending too much money on this anyway. They said even Spider-Man 2 cost so much more.
Yeah, it went over. Didn't it go over like 40 million or something like that too? So
I think, but they're even saying it's like it didn't, you don't look at it and see the value on screen, and I don't know if it's the cost of workers being,
dude, imagine selling 10 million units of a game and they're like,
it not being I mean,
don't know about that. It's like,
so imagine being able to be creative in that atmosphere. Fuck you, man.
Just the licensing fees alone, dude. They have to pay all this, so much money to Marvel. It's a lot of the operating income is going to them. That's the other thing, the margins are.
I talked to a PlayStation programmer. He called in the other day to the show and I asked him, I said, why do you do this? You could go off and make your own shit. And, and I understand it from those kinds of people, because he says, the technology is bleeding edge. All the computers we get to fuck with are top of the line. The problems we're trying to solve are really interesting. So I get why they would show up. I don't get, for the life of me, if you're a creatively driven person, why you would want to direct any Sony games at that level. Because it's not just the marketing and the team. It's the fucking, then Marvel has to have approval, right? And then the sales guys, and then you've got to compare. I'm just like,
you would assume Marvel has producers installed at Insomniac, right? Just to be there.
I think Insomniac's earned the right not to have that, but I certainly would assume they're very involved, as they should be. I mean, I think Marvel Games has done a really good job the last couple of years. And I thought Marvel Rivals looked terrible, but my understanding is from people who've played it, it's genuinely a very good Overwatch 2 ripoff. And in that, I'm in because I love Marvel. But everything from Rivals to the Sony games to Guardians, which I know underperformed, but it was a great game, to Marvel Snap, to their mobile phone stuff, they are just really doing a great job there. But I don't think Insomniac needs embedded producers, but I'm sure they're playing every build and sending back, 150 notes every build or something.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
Thank God for Insomniac, or Sony would be up Schitt's Creek with some of their first party production. Would be. Ted Price is probably like, I could have charged so much. Oh my God, I know. He waited for so long, and then he could have gotten even more. But oh well. Well, that was fun, Jaffe. I'm sorry to keep you so long. I know we went. Yeah,
no, I have a phone call I got to do with a doctor to do what is it, like review blood results?
Oh, okay.
Which I don't know if they're good or not.
Oh well, good luck, Godspeed.
Thanks. I mean, they're not. It's not like a bad thing. Just like how's my cholesterol?
Oh yeah,
kind of thing.
Sure.
Anytime. A lot of fun, and I'm going to hit you up on that D&D game, man. I'll reach out to Ken.
Yeah, please. I'm around. I love D&D. I really just don't have the opportunity to play anymore. So
yeah, if he doesn't want to play, I'm gonna get like a party of 5 is what we'll find.
Cool.
So if anybody comes up that you think would be good for it, let me
think. Yeah, I'm sure I can think of a couple cool people. Cool. Well, appreciate you, Jaffe. I appreciate all of you guys out there. Hope you enjoyed our conversation here on Sacred Symbols Plus. We'll have more Moriarty cross Jaffe soon, I'm sure, and we'll see him on Constellation and elsewhere as well. Have you been on Summon Sign yet?
I've been on once.
Oh, okay, cool.
It was great. We talked about Unicorn Overlord, which I love that game. I think a couple other things. Yeah, it's a fun show.
Awesome. Yeah. So you'll see him around for sure. We appreciate all of you out there. Thanks again for your love and kindness. We'll talk to you next time. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.